origin story. The Muppets go Hollywood, a creative visionary. It's not easy feeling blue. Henson's goodbye. Their wide world. The Muppets at the Movies, a musical legacy, the Muppet Christmas Carol, and oral history. Now, that is why I'm releasing this video in the winter season, is because who doesn't love a Muppet Christmas Carol, right? Then we have the Muppets Forever, new set, new magic, the Muppets in the Mouse House, taking the leap, and in her own words, Miss Piggy. Then we have this amazing black and white photo of Jim Henson in New York at his East 69th Street office and workshop in 1984. You can always count on the Muppets. Since their earliest iterations, Jim Henson's puppets have brought viewers laughs, joy, and wisdom. By Gina McIntyre. Once upon a time, spring 1978 to be exact, a frog and a bear wandered into a UK meadow looking to get back to nature. They weren't living, breathing animals, but rather creatures made from foam, rubber, felt, and fur. Yet in the hands of master puppeteers Jim Henson and Frank Oz, they came alive, engaging in some playfully existential banter while enjoying their time in the great outdoors. Have you ever seen a bear with a magenta nose? Kermit the Frog asks in his funny friend Fozzie Bear, attempting to prove his point that the earnest comedian would be out of place amid a sloth of actual bears. I do understand that I'm not a real bear, Fozzie replies, but I'm a real puppet. The archival footage of the famous characters dates back to nearly 50 years. It was a camera test done to determine whether the puppets would feel believable when juxtaposed against real animals and locations for their then upcoming big screen debut, 1979's The Muppet Movie. The answer, of course, was a resounding yes, though only a tiny fraction of that sense of realism had to do with how Fozzie looked while chatting up some curious cow. Instead, it was the genius of Henson and his team of gifted collaborators that made the characters feel so utterly real. They endowed their creations with humor, heart, empathy, compassion, a touch of affectionate anarchy, according to Frank Oz, and unparalleled comedic timing, transforming Kermit, Fozzie, and the rest of the Muppet gang into larger-than-life figures, occupying a rarefied position in the global cultural consciousness. Indeed, even decades after Henson's death in 1990, the madcap menagerie of talking frogs, dogs, pigs, and bears remains internationally recognized and universally beloved, so much so that the original Kermit the Frog puppet, which Henson created in 1955, is now part of the Smithsonian's permanent collection, alongside George Washington's uniform and Abraham Lincoln's hat. I would make the argument that Kermit has had as much influence on American history and culture as those other iconic objects. Ryan Lintelman, entertainment curator at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, told Smithsonian Magazine in 2024, "Plenty of fictional characters and entertainment properties have had an outsized impact on the culture, yet almost none spark the kind of overwhelming affection as the Muppets in the same Smithsonian piece." Sune Park Evans, the National Museum's senior costume conservator, notes that people are frequently moved to tears upon seeing the Kermit. The Muppets' warmth, their charm, and their winning and eminently relatable personalities all contribute to their popularity, but there's also a certain ineffable quality that holds the key to their staying power. During the troupe's more than 5 decades in the spotlight, generations of fans have grown up with them, forging such strong parasocial relationships with the characters that they essentially Sesame Street first premiered on November 10th, 1969, millions of children fell in love with the Muppets who lived there during the series' first season. 7 million children watched each day, and those feelings have never entirely died away. Surprisingly, Henson had reservations about allowing the colorful characters to come and play on the PBS preschool program. Ever since he'd first introduced the Muppets on the short-form TV series Sam and Friends in 1955, Henson had viewed them as appealing to adults, and he'd spent years battling the perception that puppets were only suitable to entertain children. Ultimately, though, Henson was won over by Sesame Street's ambition to educate viewers while rooting them in the values of inclusion, kindness, and empathy, and keep them laughing with mirthful sketches and songs. For children watching the Muppets, the characters were just as real as the human cast members, and they often faced the same sort of challenges that the audience faced. Sketches involving the Muppet characters never shied away from exploring subjects that have been considered too complex for their most youthful fans. When Kermit performed Being Green for the first time in 1970, children who loved the quirky little frog might not have fully understood the song's more profound observation of the importance of self-acceptance, but they could still appreciate the beautiful simplicity of the music and the poetry of the lyrics. When green is all there is to be, it would make you wonder why, but why wonder? Written by the show's musical director, Joe Raposo, Being Green took on a life of its own when R&B legend Ray Charles released a cover version in 1975. Evidence that something that began with the Muppets could reel in a wide swath of the public thanks to a sincere message of empowerment and uplift. Late one night, I turned on the TV, and he was singing It's Not Easy Being Green, Ray Charles recalled Sesame Street performer Bob McGrath in an interview with the Television Academy Foundation. All of a sudden, it just took on a whole other dimension that I'd never thought of. I've since used it in concert many times. You can look in the audience and just see everyone sort of nodding their head like, yes, I know where Kermit's coming from. Here it says, from left, Jim Henson on The Muppet Show with Johnny Carson in 1975. In the 1970s, his staff of designers, puppet builders, and puppeteers made Sesame Street, The Muppet Show, and other productions. If Sesame Street helped the Muppets gain a foothold in pop culture, The Muppet Show made them a full-fledged primetime sensation. Premiering September 5th, 1976, the syndicated series was conceived as a 30-minute variety show featuring musical numbers and comedy sketches, and with the celebrity guest each week, though the Muppets were the true stars. In addition to Henson's lovable Every Frog, the ensemble included diva Miss Piggy, pianist Rolf the Dog, comedian Fozzie Bear, Gopher Scooter, and such entertaining oddballs as the Daredevil Gonzo and Lou Zealand and his boomerang fish. Criticizing the onstage shenanigans from their balcony roost were curmudgeons, Statler and Waldorf. True to Henson's contention, The Muppet Show found favor across every demographic, growing in reach to air to more than 100 countries by its third season, playing to at least 235 million viewers weekly before entering its run in 1981. Writing for Time in 1978, journalist John Scow resonated so strongly with the grown-ups and kids. Kermit, Rueful, and Dither raise a part of our own natures, so absurd and defenseless that we would never let a human actor hold it in his hands. Let's go round. What these puppets mean to millions of people who have watched them is almost embarrassing to express, because the feeling they evoke is nothing less than love. The 1979 release of the Muppet movie is an autobiographical tale about a ragtag bunch of would-be entertainers journeying to Hollywood and making it big, further cemented the love that Muppet fans felt towards the characters. Further success and many more milestones followed. guest hosting The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, the Muppet movie earning 2 Academy Award nominations, merchandising contracts, movie sequels, TV specials, books, games, and other media ventures. The Muppets were everywhere, yet the magical characters never wore out their welcome. Each time they resurfaced for a new turn in the spotlight, it was like being reunited with long-lost friends who haven't aged a day and are still as funny and prone to foibles as they've always been. The secret of the Muppets is that they're not very good at what they do. Ted Lasso actor and Muppets superfan Brett Goldstein said during an interview with Brene Brown for our Unlocking Us podcast. Like, Kermit's not a great host. Fozzie is not a good comedian. Miss Piggy is not great. None of them are actually good at it, but they really love it. And they're like a family. And they like putting on a show, and they have a joy, and because of the joy, it doesn't matter that they're not good at it. Goldstein, along with John Oliver and Jason Segel, belongs to a generation of comedians, writers, and performers who cite the Muppets as a significant creative influence, and who could exhibit a reverence for the characters bordering on religious fervor. During the read-through of Segel's script for 2011's The Muppets, which starred Segel and the gang in an adventure that pitted them against a greedy oil mogul, the actor admits that he cried hearing puppeteer Steve Whitmire performing Kermit's lines. It wasn't like a burst-out-loud kind of crying, Segel told the Huffington Post. It was more embarrassing than that. It was a slow cry, where you're trying super hard not to let anyone know you're about to cry. So you're pursing your lips, but they're quivering. Next thing I know, there are tears streaming down my face, and there was nothing I could do to hide it. Segel's behavior is easy to understand considering how rare it is to interact with a fictional character you loved as a child, let alone one who remains fixed in your imagination as a source of joy, comfort, and comedy. Having been lucky enough to interview Kermit for the Los Angeles Times many years ago, I can attest to feeling quite starstruck in his presence. Thanks to the artistry of the puppeteers who manipulate them, it's easy to forget the Muppets can't walk, talk, or crack jokes without the assistance of a human, which goes a long way towards explaining why the Muppets remain such a well-loved presence today, turning up in all sorts of surprising places. Kermit, decked out in a university finery, delivered the 2025 commencement address at Henson's alma mater, the University of Maryland. He offered the graduates a message exemplifying the values that the Muppets embody: positivity, generosity, friendship, resilience, and of course, humor. Now, there is no guarantee that the show is always good or that it will go off without a hitch, or it doesn't have its, hecklers, Kermit said. Yeah, but the show must go on, and if you're with your people, you won't have to do it alone, because life is not a solo act. No, it's not. It's a big, messy, delightful ensemble piece, especially when you're with your people. Thank goodness that for all of us, the Muppets will always be our people. Here it says, the Muppets took over Good Morning America in 2011. Opposite, in 2012, the gang received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Meet the Muppets. Who's Who in the Marvelous Medley by Courtney Vincent Intriglia. The main characters. These series mainstays have always been part of the ensemble since the very beginning. Some have been making media appearances since the 1950s, when The Muppet Show debuted in 1976. Kermit the Frog. Although he likes to claim that he was born in a swamp with thousands of tadpole siblings, Kermit's roots actually trace back to the University of Maryland. It was there that a home economics student named Jim Henson glued halved tennis balls onto his mother's turquoise felt coat. When Henson first premiered the character of Kermit on Sam and Friends in 1955, he described him as a kind of easygoing, very likable, sometimes slightly a wise guy. Kermit went on to become the star and host of The Muppet Show, and had a major role on Sesame Street. He starred in nearly every Muppets production, and has made appearances on programs such as 30 Rock and The Masked Singer. Kermit's song, The Rainbow Connection, was nominated for an Academy Award, as was The First Time It Happens, from The Great Muppet Caper. porcine prima donna, is the real face of the Muppets, and there's no convincing her otherwise. Between her perpetual on-again, off-again relationship with Kermit and her competence in karate, Miss Piggy is a force of nature who has been a main character for half a century. She first appeared as Piggy Lee in a 1974 variety special, Herb Alpert and the TJB, in 1979 to celebrate the Muppet movie. People magazine published a tongue-in-cheek cover story with Miss Piggy. "My beauty," she murmurs breathily to the reporter, "is my curse." The magazine world apparently struck a chord with her because in 2011's The Muppets, Miss Piggy is the editor of the French Vogue. She is consistently ranked among the greatest TV stars and characters of all time. She received a Sackler Center First Award in 2015 for blazing feminist trails with such humor and determination. Fozzie Bear. He might technically be one of the world's worst stand-up comedians, but Fozzie Bear has brought plenty of laughs, intentionally or not, since his 1976 Muppet Show debut. During a monologue, he often punctuates his punchlines with the catchphrase, "Waka waka waka." Frank Oz, who had played the character for nearly 30 years, described Fozzie as desperately insecure, and said the bear considers his relationship with Kermit foundational to his identity. While Fozzie may not be one of the most proficient comic, he puts his talent to good use behind the scenes. The friendly bear appears in his sketches with guest stars Avery Schreiber and Nancy Walker. In Walker's episode, Kermit calls in sick, and Fozzie takes the helm as the episode's host. After a mishap-filled show, Fozzie receives an encouraging letter from none other than Walker, whose name he forgot during the initial introductions. "Dear Fozzie, I just want to tell you what a pleasure it was to work with you on your show. You're really terrific. The frog's been holding you back." Scooter. If he needed someone to run an errand on the Muppet Show, Scooter was likely your guy. The series Gopher became a fixture of backstage plotlines, originally designed to be a Nippo baby antagonist. Scooter only held his position because his rich uncle, J.B. Gross, owned the theater. Over time, Scooter's demanding nature was gradually discarded, and he became good pals with Kermit and the cast. Scooter once stepped in to host the show when Kermit accidentally got on a service train and found himself in Pittsburgh. Gonzo. Whether you know him as the Great Gonzo or Gonzo the Great, the Muppet Show daredevil shocks and awes with his dangerous and ill-advised stunts. Gonzo made his first appearance in the 1970 special The Great Santa Claus Twitch as the cigar box Frackle, and began on the Muppet Show as a minor player. He evolved into one of the primary characters, and he has to date been in every Muppets film. With his big bug eyes and lengthy snout, his blue fur and his identity varies depending on who you ask. Kermit called him a turkey, and Gonzo himself identifies as whatever. The matter was resolved in Muppets from Space in 1999, when Gonzo turned out to have been an alien all along, which a lot of people say is not canon. Gonzo's still just a whatever, and I subscribe to that belief. The Swedish Chef. Created as a parody of real-life television chefs, the mustachioed Muppet is nearly always found in the kitchen, sputtering his unintelligible "bork, bork, bork" catchphrase before hurling cooking utensils over his shoulder to crash into the crockery behind him. It's not a great idea to attempt any of the chef's recipes, as he'll wield tennis rackets and firearms instead of spatulas and ladles. He's one of the few Muppets to ever thwart Miss Piggy's martial arts aggression. In a 1980 episode, he successfully blocked her signature karate chop with a pot lid. Statler and Waldorf. Cantankerous and balcony-bound, this elderly duo holds some testy opinions of their own, of their fellow Muppet Show cast members. Statler right and Waldorf left, right here. Heckle the show from their staged left balcony box, and one is rarely seen without the other. If you you ask them why they attended each show, if they despised the program so much, even they couldn't tell you. According to one version of the Muppets show theme, Waldorf asks, "Why do we always come here?" To which Statler replies, "I guess we'll never know." Rolf the dog. This floppy-eared furball was the first Muppet, including Kermit, to reach national stardom, appearing regularly as the popular sidekick to the Jimmy Dean show from 1963 to 1966. Rolf's first gig was in 1962 as Spokes Dog in a series of Purina Dog Chow commercials aired in Canada. The sweet-natured pup joined the Muppet Show in 1976 as the program's pianist, and he starred in the recurring medical drama parody Veterinarian's Hospital as a wisecracking doctor. Here it says, "Why does everyone always blame dogs? Rolf the dog, the Muppets Take Manhattan." This is Muppet Labs, and I'm tickled pink to announce the solution to banana problems. Dr. Bunsen Honeydew. It's right there. And then we have Dr. Bunsen Honeydew. Some Muppet names have origins shrouded in mystery, with rumors and myths saturating discourse. Others, though, are pretty easy to discern. This bold yellow green-skinned scientist named after Robert Bunsen, for whom the Bunsen burner was named, and Honeydew Melon, the fruit of a similar hue. The show's resident scientist works alongside his stressed-out assistant, Beaker, and is always showing off his latest discovery or invention. Some highlights include his all-purpose tenderizer, which sundered plates and utensils along with the meat, a gorilla detector, and an exploding hat. Beaker. As Muppet Lab's perpetual victim, Beaker should really look into some workplace compensation. The wiry assistant has been zapped, punched, inflated, cloned, and turned invisible. Plus, the gauntlet of harrowing incidents has left Beaker chronically anxious. He might just be too scared to speak, as Beaker only communicates using me sounds, spelled meep, in merchandise, though on rare occasions he's been able to mutter single-word answers. Uncle Sam, or Sam Eagle. Sam Eagle, rather. If any Muppet can keep the peace on the program set, it's Sam Eagle, intensely patriotic, no nonsense. Sam loves all things USA, and is constantly appalled by the antics of his fellow cast members. Sam has appeared in every Muppets film, mostly as himself, but in a few standouts. He lends his intense discipline to other figures. Head schoolmaster in The Muppet Christmas Carol, Samuel Errol in Muppet Treasure Island, and a CIA agent in Muppets Most Wanted. In the Disney-era show, The Muppets 2015, Sam acts as an ABC executive, tasked with enforcing broadcast standards and best practices. Walter. Not only did the Disney reboot the Muppets franchise with a new film, 2011's The Muppets, it also added a new felted friend to the greater Muppets cast or universe. Walter, introduced as a roommate of Jason Segel's Gary, is a 20-something human Muppet who might just be the biggest fan of the franchise ever. Walter has a bit of a self-confidence issue, because he's the only person like him that he's seen aside from the Muppets, Siegel exclaimed to Entertainment Weekly in 2011. His dream is to meet the Muppets and be around people who are like him. After that film, Walter appeared in other productions, notably Muppets Most Wanted 2014, Muppets Now 2020, and Muppets Haunted Mansion 2021. Pepe the King Prawn. The Swedish chef isn't the only culinary expert in the Muppet universe. Pepino Rodrigo Serrano Gonzalez, otherwise known as Pepe the King Prawn, ventured to Hollywood as a chef from Madrid to pursue a career in show business. Pepe has a fiery temper. The four-armed, self-proclaimed Lothario will lash out at anyone bold enough to call him a shrimp. When he was first introduced, the character often played on Hispanic stereotypes. Unlike many of the mainstays described here, Pepe's roots come much later in the Muppet Show. The crustacean debuted in 1996 on the TV series Muppets Tonight with Seymour the elephant. Camilla the chicken. While Kermit and Miss Piggy usually come to mind as the quintessential Muppets romance, Gonzo and his great love Camilla might give them a run for their money. Camilla was first introduced in episode 318 of The Muppet Show, when Gonzo visits the hen's dressing room for the first date. But Camilla has hay fever, and the flowers Gonzo brought only make her matters worse. The eager alien then offers a palette no poultry could resist. Camilla, you're prettier by far than Godzilla. Their on-screen romance has continued through the decades. Even younger Gonzo knew the love that awaited him. In Muppet Babies 1984, Camilla is a ragdoll that sometimes comes to life in Baby Gonzo's imagination. Rizzo the rat. Love Rizzo. The pint-sized character first appeared during the cold open episode 418 of The Muppet Show as one of a group of rats, following guest star Christopher Reeve around backstage. Gee, most stars get groupies. Reeve says to the audience, I get rats. Rizzo remained a scene-stealing background character, or rodent, through the final season, and in 1992 he teamed up with Gonzo the Great to narrate the Muppet Christmas Carol, which is how I know him from originally. After his holiday debut, Rizzo went on to star in feature films and TV specials, including Muppet Treasure Island, Muppets from Space, Muppets Tonight, and Muppets Wizard of Oz, which I feel is an underrated classic. Here it says, there are two things in this life I hate, heights and jumping from them. Rizzo the Rat, Muppet Christmas Carol. The band. When it comes to Muppets music, there's no more prominent ensemble than Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, also known simply as the Electric Mayhem. Introduced in the show's 1975 pilot, the six-member rock band includes some serious talent. Animal. The Electric Mayhem's drummer is so feral that according to the Muppet Show pilot, at least, he needs to be chained in a basement cell when not on stage performing. Frank Oz, who played Animal for 25 years, summed him up in 5 words: sleep, food, drums, pain, and sex. He has a penchant for chasing women. Animal often demonstrates that two of those principles, food and drums, are quite easy to mix up. Floyd Pepper. Beyond being part of the Electric Mayhem as its bassist, the purple-hued Floyd has the difficult task of keeping Animal under control, or at least as much as possible. Disney's The Muppets Mayhem 2023 expands a bit on his character. The episode Exile on Main Street reveals that Floyd had been Animal's guardian since Animal was left on his doorstep as an infant. Floyd's clothing and last name are clear references to the Beatles' album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Indeed. Muppet Mayhem. Such a good show. We have Suit. The balding cerulean sax player is, according to Dave Goles, who performs him, just a 50-year-old burnout musician. Suit appears in many episodes of The Muppet Show, and to date Goles has played him exclusively with the exception of one episode of the Jim Henson Hour. This old soul is known for blaring short notes of music at a time and famously closing out the Muppets song show theme during the program's end credits. Lips. For the first 4 seasons of Muppet Mayhem was made up of just 5 members: Dr. Teeth, Animal, Floyd, Pepper, Janice, and Zoot. It wasn't until season 5, the show's final season, that Lips joined the band. On trumpet. According to legend, he earned the nickname One Gold Day in elementary school when his lips got stuck to the trumpet while he was practicing outdoors. Janice. As the only girl in the group, Flower Child, Janice has plump pink lips, voluminous lashes, and lengthy blonde locks. Electric Mayhem's lead guitarist also portrays nurse Janice in the recurring sketch Veterinarian Hospital. Janice has many musical talents besides the guitar. She plays the trumpet, trombone, and tambourine, and precedes the bandits. Ahead of the group's 1975 debut, Teeth made late-night rounds, appearing on The Tonight Show and The Mike Douglas Show. Almost every member of the Electric Mayhem resembles or takes inspiration from real-life musicians, and Dr. Teeth is based on New Orleans musician Dr. John. The Muppets Mayhem introduced some new Teeth lore. Dr. Teeth is also an accredited dentist. His full name is Gerald Teeth Jr., DDS. Then we have supporting characters. These recurring Muppets might not have star power of Kermit or Miss Piggy, but they're delightful all the same. Here are our favorite belted friends who get less screen time than others, but make up for it with unforgettable laughs. Robin the Frog, kind, clever, and bite-sized. Kermit's young nephew Robin bears a striking resemblance to the Muppets frontman. Robin made his TV debut before many of the other Muppets. The 1971 television special The Frog Prince, as the Prince turned frog. He sang in several episodes of The Muppet Show and is officially introduced as Kermit's relative in 1977 during the show's second season. Robin took on most prominent role in 1992 as Tiny Tim in The Muppets Christmas Carol. Uncle Deadly. When the Phantom of the Muppet Show, otherwise known as Uncle Deadly, terrorized the cast in episode 121, the world met a sinister-looking reptilian who soon faded from prominence. Disney reintroduced Deadly in the 2011 Muppets as a villain. Tex Richmond's second in command. Deadly takes on much less sinister role in 2015 ABC series as Miss Piggy's wardrobe manager, and fittingly, Uncle Deadly's ghost visage appears in the Muppets Haunted Mansion. We're gonna go along the top row and then we'll go down the bottom. Crazy Harry. If something blows up on the Muppet Show set, chances are a disheveled, cackling figure is nearby. Crazy Harry, the program's pyrotechnic expert, delights in causing chaos at the slightest mention of an explosion, following up with, "Did somebody say bang?" Besides his one-note joke, Harry largely did not have any speaking roles throughout the franchise, though he did play Triangle Bell in the Muppets Orchestra for the opening and closing of the show's first season. Link Hogthrob. The spin-headed, cleft-chinned porker debuted in 1977 as part of the Pigs in Space sketches as captain of the USS Swine Trek. Beyond the space-related episodes, Hogthrob appeared in the behind-the-scenes bits and appeared as police chief in the recurring Bear on Parole sketches. In one beloved sketch, English actor Peter Sellers, as a crazed German masseur, attempts to give Hogthrob a massage. Sellers ties up Hogthrob's arms and legs, leaving the poor pig in a knot. Sweetums. The hulking, menacing ogre first appeared in 1971's The Frog Prince TV special, alongside the cunning witch, Demonella Grindelwald. He was also on Cher's 1975 variety show. Sweetums accompanied the singer on the Beatles song Something. But the most beloved Sweetums part is probably in 1979's The Muppet Movie. After getting separated from the crew for most of the film, he bursts through the screen at the end, declaring, "I just knew I'd catch up to you guys." Beauregard. Not only does the Muppets Theater dim-witted janitor attempt to keep the place clean, he looks anvils and pianos, works as a stagehand, and has even served as a rat president and an honorary rodent. Beau's most notable performance as a taxi driver in 1981's The Great Muppet Caper, when he drives Kermit the Frog, Ronzi, Fozzie, and Gonzo around London to the Happiness Hotel when Kermit says they'll catch the thieves red-handed, originally played one of the merry men in the Muppets adaptation of Robin Hood. Newsman. Unlike New Zealand, Newsman's name is very much tied to his identity. He's a small man-like puppet who anchors Muppets News Flash. The journalist suffers a nasty string of bad luck throughout the show, with wrecking balls crashing into its head, electric sledgehammer attacks, and a cow plummeting onto his person. During the credits of 2011's The Muppets, he appears as a telethon operator and makes announcements about the rebooted Muppets following their grand finale. Bobo the Bear. When it comes to the Muppet Bears, Fozzie gets the lion's share of the attention, but Bobo, the bumbling security guard on the Muppets Tonight set, deserves some recognition too. Throughout many of his film appearances, including Muppets from Space and 2011's The Muppets, Bobo plays the well-meaning suit-clad assistant to the villain, who undercuts their menacing nature. Perhaps Bobo's most beloved appearance is when he attempted to woo Cindy Crawford in 1996. Marvin Suggs. Banging on round tufts of fluff he calls a Muppet phone. Marvin Suggs is a recurring musical act who debuted in the Muppet Show in 1976, playing Lady of Spain. When guest host Leslie Ann Warren accuses Suggs of being cruel for hitting live creatures, Marvin retorts, "Of course they are alive. You cannot make music by hitting dead creatures." Decades later, in Muppet's Haunted Mansion, Suggs proves his theory wrong, using a set of human skulls as a Muppaphone. Pops. The elderly stage doorman was first introduced during the Muppet Show's 5th season. Pops is a delightful bit where he is blissfully unaware of the celebrity status of the show's many guest stars, greeting them with a twangy, "Who were you?" When they arrive on set, the Great Muppet Caper, Pop's biggest film role, he advises Kermit and company on the several ways they can pay for their stay at the hotel. A credit card. A. Credit card. B. Cash. C. Sneak out in the middle of the night. Chapter 1. Imagining fun. Jim Henson believed that life should be joyous, fun, and fulfilling. From practicing puppetry in college to building a thriving Muppets workshop, his life's work embodied that. Late night, Broadway, and weird ideas creating the Muppets, how a young puppeteer found its footing and created a global phenomenon. Miss Piggy was never supposed to be a star. The flamboyant pork chop originally appeared as a nameless background dancer in a 1974 collaboration between the Muppets and American drummer Herb Alpert. Her designer named the character Miss Piggy Lee in a clever nod to the multi-talented singer Peggy Lee. When the Muppet Show premiered, soon afterwards, Piggy was still a background player, getting passed between performers including Muppets mainstay Frank Oz. And one fateful day, everything changed. I was working as Miss Piggy with Jim, who was doing Kermit, and the script called for her to slap him. Oz recounted in an interview with Brian J. Jones for his book Jim Henson, the biography. Instead of a slap, I gave him a funny karate hit. Somehow that hit crystallized their character for me. The coyness, including hiding the aggression. That unexpected karate chop and the accompanying hi-ya brought down the house. Everyone on set stopped in their tracks before demanding that Oz do it again. Next time he performed Miss Piggy. He gradually took over the character full-time, and she quickly became an international sensation. Piggy is born in the almost literal explosion in his karate chop, Jones says. The story of Miss Piggy's first break might seem like lightning in a bottle, a once-in-a-lifetime stroke of genius that most people will never experience, but for the Muppets, it was just another workday. From their humble beginnings as lip-singing entertainers on the local network television, the Muppets' ultimate success was the result of creativity, improvisation, teamwork, and a rotating ensemble both behind and in front of the camera. With Jim Henson and his go-to character Kermit the Frog at their center, the Muppets conquered was a kid, I never saw a puppet show. Henson once told biographer Christopher Finch, I never played with puppets or had any interest in them. It was just a means to an end. Jim Henson was born in Mississippi in 1936, where he was raised as a Christian Scientist. Interesting, I never knew that. As a teenager, his mother, Betty, refused to buy medicine to treat his severe acne due to her religious beliefs, and Jim grew a thick beard as soon as he could to cover the resulting acne scars on his face. His father, Paul, worked as an agronomist in the U.S. Department of Agriculture and moved the family to Maryland in 1938. Henson's maternal grandmother, Sarah Deere Brown, taught him arts and crafts. As a child, Henson was obsessed with popular culture. The family moved back to Mississippi after Jim finished first grade and spent his Saturdays at a local movie theater called The Temple, where he watched everything from cowboy movies to comedies to serials and cartoons. He also listened to the radio, which ironically may have been his first introduction to puppetry, through the popular ventriloquist Edgar Bergen. With just the audio experience, a young Henson imagined that for each voice Bergen created as a distinct and real person. I wasn't thinking of any of those people as puppets, Henson later told the New York Times. They were human to me. But nothing could have prepared Henson for the arrival of the television. As a teenager in the 1950s, he begged his parents to buy a TV set, and he was instantly obsessed with it. Jim was a gadget guy, Jones says. He loved that what you were watching was happening somewhere else in real time. He watched all the TV he could. From that moment on, Henson's new goal in life was clear. He wanted to work in television. At the time, puppets had nothing to do with it. Henson could draw well and build things thanks to the influence of his grandmother. He figured he'd eventually get a job designing sets on a TV show or something similar. He just wanted so badly to be part of what was happening in television. He was fascinated by its creative potential. This is Barbara Miller, Deputy Director for Curatorial Affairs at the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens, New York, which hosts a permanent Jim Henson exhibit and has become a hub for Muppet screenings and events. Before he had even graduated from high school in Maryland, the family moved back to Washington, D.C. area in 1948. Henson got his wish in the spring of 1954. He heard that the local CBS affiliate was looking for young people to work marionettes for a local show, so he went to the library and found a couple of books on puppetry. Less than 2 weeks later, Henson and a friend auditioned and got the job. The junior morning show was canceled after just 3 weeks for violating child labor laws. Henson was 17 and of legal working age, but several of his fellow puppeteers were not. However, Jim's journey to the Muppets was just getting started. Once he got into puppetry on TV, he realized he was good at it, Jones says. Part of that was because he hadn't been raised on puppetry and didn't know the rules. Henson bounced between TV productions, where his puppet skills were put to good use. At the same time, he enrolled at the University of Maryland in 1954 and signed up for a puppetry course. It was there that he met another student, Jane Nabel, who would become Henson's partner in the puppetry business and eventually in marriage. The first known mention of the word Muppets appeared in 1955 in the TV highlights section of the Washington Post and Times Herald, with a description of a new variety show called Afternoon. The listing promised special features by the Muppets, who were puppeteers. It's unclear if the term originally referred to Jim and Jane rather than their creations, or if that listing was a mistake. As for where the word Muppet itself comes from, the truth is nobody knows. For a long time, I would tell people that it was a combination of marionettes and puppets, but basically it was just a word we coined, Henson told journalist Judy Harris in a 1982 interview. We have done very few things that connected with marionettes. From early on, what defined the Muppets were the many ways Henson and effects was no longer necessary. We used the set itself like a puppet stage, with the characters moving in free space, framed by the television set, Henson explained. At the Broadcasting Cable Hall of Fame ceremony in 1993, everything we did was designed for television. They also came up with the idea of placing a monitor in front of the puppeteer so they could watch their performance in real time. This provided an advantage that human actors didn't have, the ability to observe the puppets in action and adjust on the fly. You'd perform, but you'd also be in the audience, Jane Henson told Jones for his biography. I think that's a big difference because people at home watching are seeing a very intimate, internal thing that's happening with the performer. Here it says, opposite from top, Henson touched up an early Kermit. Here. Jim and Jane met in puppetry class at the University of Maryland, married in 1959, and had 5 children. Here. Above, Henson maneuvered Rolf the dog in conversation with singer Jimmy Dean in 1963. The Muppets' success on Afternoon eventually led to their own show called Sam and Friends, which aired beginning in May 1955 on the Washington, D.C. network WRC-TV, filling a 5-minute gap between the local news and the Tonight Show. Sam and Friends is arguably the earliest incarnation of what would eventually become the Muppets as we know them today. Its star was Sam, a bald human puppeteer with a round nose, but his friends were much weirder. There was Harry the hipster, a snake-like thing sporting sunglasses, a purple skull named Yorick, and a pair of Muppets with beacon-shaped noses called Hank and Frank. Then there was Kermit. Kermit wasn't a frog yet, and his skin was milky blue. Henson created him while spending time with his dying grandfather, and constructed him out of his mother's old coat, with ping pong ball cut in half for the eyes. Kermit was always special, and paradoxically, his simple design made him one of the most expensive Muppets. Kermit is the closest one to me, Henson once told the Washington Post. He's the easiest to talk with. He's the only one who can't be worked by anyone, only by me. See, Kermit is just a piece of cloth with a mouthpiece in it. The character is literally my right hand. Sam and Friends had a frantic energy with each 5-minute episode featuring a mix of lip-syncing and slapstick comedy that typically ended in violence. In the early days, the Muppets, we had 2 endings, Henson told Stephanie St. Pierre for the book. The story of Jim Henson, creator of the Muppets. Either one creature ate the other, or both of them blew up. But Sam and Friends was a hit, even winning a local Emmy, and whenever the station tried to cancel it, it was inundated with angry fan letters. The show ultimately ran for 6 years and over 400 episodes, but Henson was already thinking bigger. Here it says, it was initially unclear who would work which character on Sesame Street, but the mild-mannered Henson took on Ernie while making serious Oz piloted Bert. Opposite, 8 feet tall with a sense of childlike wonder, Big Bird was conceived as a stand-in for the show's young audience. The commercial era. It didn't take long for Steve Allen, then host of the Tonight Show, to find out about the bizarre puppets appearing on TV sets around the D.C. area each night, right before him. So in 1956, Allen invited the Muppets to New York to perform in front of a national audience. The 2-minute performance features Kermit in a blonde wig lip-singing "I've Grown Accustomed to Your Voice" to a second character obscured by a mask. As Kermit continues, the other Muppet eats the mask, and is revealed to be Yorick, the purple skull, who then proceeds to devour Kermit's leg and drag him off stage. It was classic early Muppets, simple and weird with a violent ending. The audience loved it. In the next few years, the Muppets continued to appear on various late night and variety shows. At around the same time, Jim and Jane were approached by the Washington, D.C. advertising agency Belmont Muppets named Wilkins, who loved Wilkins' copy, and Wontkins, who didn't. Most of the ads focused on Wilkins attempting to convince Wontkins otherwise, usually through violence. The ads were a huge shift from the simple calm TV commercials of the time. They were also an instant success, hence it made almost 180 ads and boosted Wilkins' coffee sales by 25%. The company even sold Wilkins and Wontkins puppets, technically the first Muppets merch, during the 1958 Christmas season. The Hensons never saw a cent of those sales. Muppet Inc. was established in 1958 by the 1960s, the team started to grow beyond Jim and Jane. They married in 1959. In 1961, Henson met a young Frank Oz, then still high school student, at the Puppeteers of America Festival. Oz was there with his parents, both successful puppeteers, and was performing an act with his friend Jerry Jewell, a few years his senior. Soon afterward, Henson made his first hires in it. Don Salin, who designed and built Muppets, and Jewell as a performer and eventually head writer. Jewell jumped at the opportunity. This guy, Jim Henson, was like a sailor who had studied the compass and found that there was a fifth direction in which one could sail. Jewell told biographer Christopher Finch, "When he offered me a berth on that ship, I signed on." That same year, Henson and Jewell traveled to Germany to perform at the U.S. Food Fair, where they tested out several new concepts, including a German-speaking chef who was controlled by two people. Henson used one hand to operate the head, and his second as the character's left hand, while Jewell controlled the right hand. The character was a hit, and later became the Muppets' mainstay of the Swedish Chef. Soon afterwards, when Purina commissioned the Muppets for a series of dog food commercials, Henson decided to use a similar two-handed puppet design in the creation of a new, now iconic Muppet, Rolf the dog. Two pivotal things happened to the Muppets in 1963. First, Frank Oz graduated from high school and moved to New York, where Henson and the rest of the crew had recently set up shop. Oz immediately changed the dynamic, bringing new energy and talent to an already impressive operation. Frank and Jim were Lennon and McCartney, Jones says. Second, the Muppets got an offer for a recurring segment on the Jimmy Dean Show, a new variety show segment starring the country music star. This quickly led to a team-up between Dean and Rolf, who would appear together in regular segments to banter and sing. Behind the scenes, Henson got the opportunity to sit in the writer's room and observe how a variety show got made. But the biggest breakthrough came from watching Rolf interact with Jimmy Dean. None of my Muppets had ever worked with humans before, Henson reflected in an interview with Baltimore Sun journalist Aldine Bird. Jimmy Dean turned Rolf into a perfectly believable human kind of dog. As the 60s rolled on, the Muppets only became more successful, bouncing between various TV shows and commercials. A Frito-Lay deal led to the creation of a snack-eating creature later known as Cookie Monster. But Jim Henson was also becoming increasingly dissatisfied. The Muppets were paying the bills, Jones says, but Jim was always experimenting. These experiments included an Oscar-nominated abstract short film called Timepiece, and the experimental documentary Youth 68, Everything's Changing, or Maybe It Isn't, broadcast on NBC. Henson also became obsessed with the idea of opening a high-end nightclub where visuals matching the music would be projected on the walls. He almost purchased a building in New York to make it happen. By the late 60s, the Muppets had never been bigger, and Henson had never been more distracted. There's an alternate timeline where he pivoted entirely to an avant-garde filmmaking, or perhaps opened a chain of discotheques. Instead, he got the offer he couldn't resist. Without Sesame Street, it would have been a completely different trajectory, Miller says. Sesame Street. You can't think of Sesame Street without the Muppets, says Jones. And yet, when the Children's Television Workshop was first drawing up ideas for a kids' show that would become both educational and entertaining, a radical idea at the time, Henson wasn't involved. Sesame Street were Ernie and Bert, an odd couple in the mold of Wilkins and Wontkins, who would be played by Henson and Oz. The design was so simple and pure and wonderful, Oz told biographer Christopher Finch. You had somebody who is all vertical and somebody who is horizontal. While the original plan was to keep the human characters and Muppets separate to avoid confusing children, CDW soon ran into a problem. When they showed Sesame Street to test audiences, kids got bored whenever the action got away from the Muppets. They realized they needed Muppets to interact with humans too, which meant creating two more characters, Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch. Sesame Street debuted in November 1969 and was an overnight hit. The December Big Bird appeared as a guest on the Ed Sullivan show, but Jim Henson wasn't satisfied. He was still experimenting with other Muppet ideas, including The Great Santa Claus Switch, his 1970 TV movie, featuring both puppets and humans, which wasn't a huge success but led to the creation of both Gonzo and the Fraggles. And the first performance of his groovy musical sketch, Phenomena, on 1969, also on Sullivan. By the early 70s, Henson was stuck on another idea, a live Broadway show featuring the Muppets. To test it out, he teamed up in 1971 with Nancy Sinatra for her Las Vegas residency, which featured an oversized Phenomena performance and a massive new Muppet called Boss Man. When that worked, Henson moved forward with his plan, at one point even renting out a theater in New York. It was around this time that Dave Coles, a puppet maker from Silicon Valley, who would go on to perform as Gonzo the Great, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew, and countless other Muppets, joined the company after being promised that if the Broadway show or something else got picked up, he would get to perform. Jim more than got that promise, Coles says. However, it wasn't on Broadway. We found other things to do, Coles explains. Instead, Henson had returned to another idea he'd been toying with for years, a 30-minute primetime TV show starring the Muppets. Here it says Oscar the Grouch, opposite with Mr. Hooper, signaled that Sesame Street wasn't just for kids. Above Oz, Henson, and other puppeteers making the ABC special The Muppet Show Sex and Violence, the original Muppets pilot. Here we have pitching The Muppet Show. The time is right for a variety show hosted by dogs, frogs, and monsters, Henson proclaimed in his original pitch. A young ABC executive named Michael Eisner, who would eventually become a CEO of Disney, quickly saw the appeal and approved the pilot. In 1973, the Muppets got to work. Henson's first idea was the Muppets Valentine Show, a riff on holiday-themed TV specials, with Mia Farrow as celebrity guest. The show starred a new Muppet called Wally, with Kermit regulated to a supporting role. Henson wanted to focus on running the show rather than performing as its lead character. Coles created several new Muppets, including an old man named Brewster. More importantly, he finally got his chance to perform. Jim and Frank came in after work and worked with me in front of a mirror on puppetry, Coles recalls. During a press tour, Henson continued to push back against the assumption that puppets were for kids. We made the special to appeal to all ages because a lot of people think of us as a company that does shows for children, he told The Hollywood Reporter. The Muppets Valentine Show aired in January 1974. The result was positive, but ABC wasn't sold. Instead of picking up on the show, they eventually offered Henson a development deal for a few programs and another shot at a pilot. In response, he leaned even harder into his conviction that there was an audience for puppets. The result was The Muppet Show Sex and Violence. It would become a half-hour show with no guest star and a lot more zany comedy, Henson wrote. New characters developed for Sex and Violence, including grinning keyboard player named Dr. Teeth, the Swedish chef, originally called the Swedish Meatball, the ever-serious Sam the Eagle, iconic hecklers Statler and Waldorf, although they wouldn't get their balcony seats just yet, and the Elector Mayhem Band. An early version of Miss Piggy, who had already been through several permutations, also appeared. Bonnie Eric Erickson, who designed the Muppet, says that there was a last-minute need for a young diva character, and Miss Piggy was available. I had to throw on whatever fabric we had, Erickson recalls. It was a lavender satin. I didn't have time to redo her arms, which had hooves, so I made gloves, which stuck around for quite a while. To hide the seam between her head and body, I added a bunch of pearls. Erickson also created Statler and Waldorf, the iconic Muppet Hitlers that were inspired by the old men she used to observe hanging out at the Yale Club at the Grand Central Station. I sketched 2 old guys in the club and showed it to Jim, Erickson recalls. He said, "We don't really have anything for that," but later he came back and said, "It's time to do those guys." Once again, Kermit took a backseat in the Muppet Show, Sex and Violence. The pilot centered on Nigel, Sam the Eagle, and Floyd Pepper, Electric Mayhem's hippie bassist, organizing a pageant inspired by the 7 Deadly Sins. Reviews were mixed, and ABC decided not to move forward. The network couldn't see beyond the puppets, Miller says. They didn't believe anyone over a child's age would watch. They weren't willing to put them on prime time. After ABC passed, CBS briefly entertained the idea, but then that fell through too. It seemed that Henson's grand vision for the Muppets had failed, yet again, and a lifeline came flying in from an unexpected place. Here it says, "We know each other so well that we can kind of bounce off each other when we're working," Henson said of the original team. "This working relationship has kind of a marvelous chemistry to it." The Muppet Show. Lord Lou Grade had been keeping an eye on Jim Henson ever since they crossed paths in London a few years earlier during the production of a TV special starring the Muppets and Julie Andrews. A vaudeville dancer turned television mogul, Grade saw promise in Henson's idea. He reached out in 1975, offering to produce the series in England and syndicate around the world. By January 1976, Henson was in London filming the first 2 episodes of The Muppet Show. A new show once again meant new characters. This time, that included Scooter and Fozzie Bear. They also brought back Gonzo the Great from the Great Santa Claus Switch. He was pitched to Coles as a performance artist making terrible art. Coles recalls coming up with Gonzo's voice the morning before a rehearsal. "I was shaving and I was thinking, I really need to think of a voice for this guy. What does he sound like?" And as I was shaving, I thought, well, he has a long nose, so he's probably like a nasal. So I'll make him kind of like that. But he's really scruffy looking, so I'll add a bit of gravel to it. When the early cuts of the first 2 episodes got mixed internal feedback, Henson finally gave in and installed Kermit as the star of the show, partially to win over Sesame Street fans. Ernie and Bert also appeared in an early segment. "There's a bit of me and Kermit," Henson told London's TV Times. Kermit's the organizer, always desperately trying to keep things going while surrounded by all these crazy nuts. Finally, all these characters developed over the years had a place to interact and evolve. For the first time, the Muppets had a home all their own. Some background characters like Miss Piggy got their chance in the limelight. Others took longer to develop. Fozzie Bear proved particularly challenging. Frank Oz struggled to make the character an anxious stand-up comedian work within the context of the Muppet Show. It was only once they paired him with Kermit as the straight man to Fozzie's clumsy comic that it all clicked into place. "We were so fortunate we didn't get an original ABC series," Coles observed. "Had we gotten a network special, we would have been cancelled in a few episodes, because it took us a while to find our audience, to find the show's characters. We were lucky that we were syndicated. At that time, we thought, oh, we're second-class citizens, but it turned out we owe our lives to that, because it had a full 24 episodes a season to just work." The Muppet Show premiered in September 1976. Each TV station could choose what episode to debut out of the first batch, but most picked the one starring Rita Moreno, which included her iconic performance of Fever with an overzealous animal on drums. The show became a global phenomenon, proving once and for all that Jim Henson was right. A primetime program starring the Muppets was made for a Muppets were somehow still just getting started on a journey that would take them to the forefront of popular culture and beyond. In hindsight, it's easy to see the Muppets were inevitable. These characters have existed for so long now that they seem as real as our favorite human actors, but the story of their creation reveals just how much they had to get right and wrong to bring the weird, beautiful, groundbreaking puppets to life. Here it says, opposite from top, Miss Piggy and Mark Hamill, Waldorf and Statler, Dick Van Dyke with Piggy and Kermit, and the Swedish Chef. And we have the Muppet Show intro complete with Gonzo hanging out in the O, the title. Kermit the Frog and his creator Jim Henson on the set of 1979's The Muppet Movie. Classic. The Muppets Go Hollywood. A decade into their hit TV show, the Muppets made a move for the big screen by John Sco from a time at December 25th, 1978. It's cool that we have all these articles from all over time. Stop giggling and pay attention, because we're only going to discuss what may be the only adult show on television. Children may stay in the room if they do not squeal excessively. Now then, what is small and green and surrounded by confusion and is applauded each week by more people than there are in the entire U.S.? No, not the wobbling dollar, but a more cheerful and indeed more bankable asset, Kermit the Frog. He is the gallant and slightly desperate master of ceremonies of a weekly eruption called The Muppet Show, which in its third season on the air has become what is almost certainly the most popular television entertainment now being produced on Earth. The Muppet Show has seen at least 235 million people in 106 countries. Those who have not met Kermit will ask, in thank you not today tones, a frog, and they will ask, adult. The answer to the first question is a confident yes. The answer to the second is a ringing yes, but a phenomenon has been observed. Children trap their parents in front of a terrible tube and force them to watch the Muppets. The parents become habituated, and henceforth on Muppet night, somewhat sheepishly remind the children to close their calculus textbooks and turn on the set. In the last stage of addiction, the parents are sheepless and do not require the presence of child's stooges. For those who have been out of touch with this aspect of reality, what exactly is a Muppet? The word was coined from marionette and puppet, says Jim Henson, 42, the skinny bearded Zeus from whose brow the creatures began to spring 20-odd years ago, when he was a teenager hooked on television. He is the rarest of creatures in imitative and adaptive world of entertainment, an originator. His brilliant central perception was that puppets could throw away the punch and Judy box that had confined them for centuries, and let the television set be their stage. The camera demanded the use of close-ups, and abruptly the single expression puppet was obsolete. The Muppets were new, and they were pure television creatures. Today they are the stars of Sesame Street, as well as Henson's global hit, The Muppet Show. Like other geniuses, Henson is a sly fellow whose sound artistic instinct is to resist critical analysis. If you peel art away layer by layer, what you have at the end is all the peelings and no onion. For years, Henson, who played Kermit, insisted that the character was not a frog, but a frog-like creature. Peel that, you peelers. Now he backtracks and says that Muppet was simply a word that sounded good to him. The sound explanation that happens to sound logical. Logic peeling aside, a Muppet is mostly of the time, but not always, a largish arm puppet whose body consists of the arm and head, surrounds the hand of its operator. When the operator's thumb and fingers come together, the Muppet's mouth closes, and when fingers separate, the mouth opens. If the Muppet's face is playable as Kermit's is, is not much more than a green felt sock that fits over a human hand with a wide pink slit for the mouth and what looks like glued-on halves of ping pong balls for eyes. The clenchings and wrinklings of the operator's fist can change the expression from considerable subtlety. Not simply smiles, but wistful smiles are possible if the face is relatively stiff, like that of Kermit's formidable friend, Miss Piggy, whose head is carved from a block of plastic insulating foam. Then, although a certain degree of meaningful nose crinkling is a possible expressiveness, is largely an illusion created by body movement and voice. In either case, the puppeteer can synchronize the figure's lip movements and speech, a technique Henson originated early in his career. Muppet jaws do not move with each syllable. That would make big-nosed figures look too agitated. It takes long practice to learn the knack of mouthing with the importance of syllables in a sentence. An observation made with some regularity is that Kermit the Frog is the Mickey Mouse of the 70s. Maybe so, the Muppets have just finished making an $8 million Hollywood film called The Muppet Movie that chronicles their journey from the Boondocks to show business glory. Another film is under discussion, an astonishing variety of Muppet toys and other artifacts, including long-arm puppets, fill the stores. An amusement park of Disneyland sort has been talked of. Muppets have been in TV commercials and made guest appearances on such varied offerings as the old Ed Sullivan Show and the current Saturday Night Live. This week, an hour-long TV special, and my daughter's jog band Christmas is in the U.S. And of course, the Muppets, Bert and Ernie, Oscar the Grouch, who lives in a garbage can, and the renowned Big Bird, who is 8 feet tall and not just an arm, but an entire person inside him, have presided over Sesame Street since that wonderfully imaginative kids show began 10 years ago. The Muppets show opens always with a knock on a dressing room door. Scooter, the company's errand boy, sticks his head inside to announce curtain time. He has a human boy caricatured and thus a representative of the show's 3 main species. Human Muppets are featured players. Floyd, the supremely groovy guitarist, Janice, his girlfriend, Suit, the blue-faced sax player, who is seen at all, Animal, the out-of-control drummer, who must be chained to the wall, Crazy Harry, the special effects man who is fond of explosions, the incomprehensible and meatball-brained Swedish chef, and such peripheral loonies as New Zealand, manager of the Boomerang Fish Act. The stars are the animals, Kermit, the pure and reasonable frog, the ineffable Miss Piggy, every circumferential inch a lady, Wolf the dog, a philosophical pianist, Fozzie Bear, the can't-stand-up comic, the Great Gonzo, the magnificently inferior creature whose inventors insist, despite damning evidence, that he is not a turkey. Monsters are the remaining important category of beings, such as enormities as Sweetums, who is about 9 feet tall and covered with a 3-day growth of brownish shag, and Thog, who is a good deal bigger, still growing, and lend chaos to the goings-on, but don't say much. Other apparitions, such as the 7-foot carrot with which Gilda Radner sang a Gilbert and Sullivan duet, fit messily into a miscellaneous. Scooter's curtain time alert is for the flesh and blood human being, who is the weekly guest star. Raquel Welch, for instance, looking scholarly in spectacles as she practices Shakespeare. Scooter guesses that she has decided to change her image, and he says that this is fine. She doesn't need to wear any of those candy revealing costumes on the Muppet Show. Well, thanks, Scooter. Unless you want me to. Immediately, half a dozen heavy-duty monsters thrust themselves through the door and beg in plaintive unison, "Oh, please, want to." The joke works nicely because these are Muppets, and voyeurism is acceptable. It is the kind of gag that evokes queasiness when it is given to middle-aged band leaders in variety shows. After show's theme song. It's time to put on makeup. It's time to dress up right. For the big everybody on stage opening, Kermit gives the viewers the high blood pressure hello, and Gonzo tries to blow a fanfare on his trumpet. It never works. But turflies come out of the trumpet. Water comes out, or the thing explodes. Each week, Gonzo gives it a good try. Each week, a new disaster. Gonzo looked dazed, but not surprised. A tiny chaplain. Some sort of dizzy production number generally follows. One week, Eskimo folk songs were promised, and sure enough, there were Miss Piggy and the show's other pigs, perched on an ice floe, dressed in mukluks and parkas, surrounded by igloos, walruses, and snow. In the meantime, two old geezers named Statler and Waldorf are making scornful remarks from their box seats, and terrible things are happening backstage. Kermit works frugally, but events conspire against him. It's payday, and in the cash box, Kermit finds only 3 moths and a washer, more than what we usually have. There's a wondrous Muppet workshop at headquarters in Manhattan, where clever trolls build anything from a talking avocado to a dancing camel, or more routinely, replacement figures for Fozzie Bear and Kermit. A crisis still not entirely resolved, developed recently when the manufacturer of the green cloth in which Kermit is made went out of business. But the most critical element of the actor of these viewer sees is not cloth or polyurethane. It is the character. Each of the most successful Muppets has grown, slowly and organically, from exaggerated fragments to its operator's character. Kermit is not Jim Henson, but is a fascinating piece of Henson. He is the smartest of the Muppets, and he runs things as firmly as possible to run an explosion in a mattress factory. Like Henson, he is absolute boss in all matters, artistic and financial. Kermit is, in addition, a lovable, absolutely decent fellow. Henson's employees agree, and complete unanimity that Henson is that sort of boss. He had no plans to make the Muppet Show MC a self-portrait, but when he used another puppet, Nigel the band later, in the role in an early version of the show, the character did not gel, and Kermit, who had been in and out of Henson's skits for 20 years or so, got the job. Mel Brooks, an impassioned Muppet fan, says the message they telegraph is the meek shall inherit the earth. Mostly this is true. Kermit is meek, and he is thankful each day for which the sky does not fall. Alonzo is meek, and Rolf tickles the ivories with a dogged smile. Fozzie Bear is a teddy, except for Animal, who wrestles alligators when he is let off the chain. The only alarming character in the Muppet Society is Miss Piggy. She is of iron fists and lavender gloves. She wants everyone to treat her like a lady, and if they don't, she'll cut them in half, says Muppeteer Ringos 34. He should know. It is his right arm that wriggles Piggy through the black belt coquetries. When the Muppet Show began, Miss Piggy was nobody, a mere member of the chorus of talent, beauty, physical violence. When patting her eyelids doesn't bring surrender, she has become a star. Her finest moments may now be when she plays the ingenue role in a show, a restlessly torpid pigs in space skit, a send-up that is funny because it assumes correctly that the viewer is bored by astronauts. Aboard the spaceship swine trick, she is every bit as lard-witted as Captain Link Hogthrob and the sinister Dr. Strangeborg, and she is greedy in her rightful attention. She is also greedy for Kermit, and once under the pretext of doing a wedding skit, she managed to maneuver him in front of a fully loaded preacher. He escaped the pit of matrimony by the desperate stratagem of summoning New Zealand, who had been hanging around backstage waiting for his lucky break to bring on those tacky, awful boomerang fish. Miss Piggy had a wandering eye, however, and if the week's guest star happened to be a good-looking man, she latches onto him. After dancing the stirring pas de deux from Swine Lake with Rudolph Nureyev, she stalked the poor fellow into a steam bath and drove him forth with his towel askew. Oz conceded to be, after Henson, the most gifted of the Muppet performers. He taught Miss Piggy all she knows, and he plays Fozzie Bear, Animals, Sam the Eagle, and on Sesame Street, Bert and Cookie Monster. Holding his naked right hand in the air, Oz demonstrates the basics of Muppet acting. You can do proud, he says. His hand sways and struts upward. Sad. The hand with the closed fingers forward, as the Muppet mouse might be, droops at the wrist. The fingers float downwards. Confusion. The hand pauses. One way, looks another, pauses, seems to be glancing over its shoulder. One morning on the set of the Muppet movie, Oz stood among the camera cables waiting to do a shot with Henson/Kermit. He considered Miss Piggy's psyche. She's had her consciousness raised, but she still likes diamonds. She's a very 50s lady, and that's part of the problem. As he talked, his hand slipped into its working position inside Miss Piggy. She twisted this way and that, looking for Kermit, eager to get on with the movie. After a take, as director Jim Frawley, Kid Blue, yelled, "Cut!" Miss Piggy patted Kermit on his little green behind. Kermit swatted at her hand and jumped aside. Miss Piggy then complainingly teased about the man who's always following me around, referring to Oz, and coyly peeked under the green flap at the bottom of Kermit's costume, exposing Jim Henson's arm. "Oh, you've got one too," she said. It was the kind of off-camera high play that goes on more or less constantly. Making a full-length Muppet movie was a gamble. Could the loopy, slapdash spontaneity of that television program be sustained through a film narration? Could Frawley frame his shots that it would be painfully obvious that most of the characters lacked workable feet? How would Muppets look outdoors? To settle that point, Frawley last spring took a Super 8 England, where the Muppets TV show was taped, and did a test with Henson and the others in a meadow. As he was shooting, a cow wandered over to have a look at Fozzie. The results were amazingly good. The brown cow and the Muppet, covered with burned-out orange fake fur, looked as natural together as Newman and Redford. The shooting of the film was slow and difficult. The first scene called for the camera to swoop down on a Georgia swamp, where Kermit is discovered sitting on a log in the middle of a pond, playing a banjo. The decision had been made to try for the realism of actual photography rather than the fake scenes with processed shots. So a watertight tank was built, and into the tank went a small television camera and all 6 feet 3 inches of Jim Henson. The movie's set swamp. The log was fitted on top of it, and Kermit was perched on the log. Air was brought to him, Frawley's instructions, and the TV picture. Divers stood by to rescue Henson in case the tank leaked. Through the rubber sleeve at the top of the tank, Henson manipulated Kermit's head using a stiff and nearly invisible black wire, made Kermit's left hand strum the banjo strings. Another Muppeteer on shore worked a radio control that, now and then, between takes, someone would row over, pass a cup of iced tea down to Henson through the rubber sleeve. The swamp scene was by no means the most complicated. The script calls for a Hollywood talent scout, played by human actor Dom DeLuise, who has strayed into the swamp to paddle by and discover Kermit, and show him a copy of Variety that contains the by chance, and urging all frogs who want to become rich and famous come to Hollywood. But down the road lurks Doc Hopper, Charles Dunning, who wants this particular talented frog to shill for his fast food chain, which specializes in French fried frog legs. Kermit encounters all of his Muppet Show pals, and such assorted humans as Elliot Gould, Carol Kane, and Deli Savalas on his journey to Los Angeles. At one point, the Muppets are riding in an old Studebaker, with Fozzie at the wheel, several others in the front seat, and another bunch in the rear, jammed under the dashboard behind the back seat, with all of their cables and TV monitors, half a dozen Muppet Scooter and Sweetums. Dave Coles sued Gonzo, a former industrial designer who got started when he saw Ernie on Sesame Street and made his own Ernie doll, and squeezed in somewhere a newcomer named Steve Whitmire. The Muppet people work under conditions that would not be acceptable to tunnel rats. The 100 days of shooting ended when all the scenery fell down as planned in a movie within the movie that Kermit and his friends were trying to make. Their styrofoam rainbow lay in pieces, but through a jagged hole in the downstage roof, a real rainbow was seen to shimmer. Happy ending. Quick sweep to the stage and the pack of Muppets in their boxes, because taping for the TV show's new season begins in London in 5 days. Muppets live in suitcases, and Muppet people live out of suitcases. Jim Henson gave up the keys to his rented Mulholland Drive hacienda and flew to New York. There he rallied to support the troops at headquarters and transferred with his increasingly large staff of business people. Henson is clearly a gifted businessman and on the point of becoming a very wealthy one, but he is secretive. When asked to talk figures, the Muppet Show, considered separately, is listed on the books as making no profit, in part because Henson keeps putting money back into the program. Help is on the way. The long-range profit for this show is down the road. When it's syndicated and sold to the station, Henson says it's a couple of years away. Producer Lou Grade adds with satisfaction that they take from this strip syndication the sale of the show for the same time as lot, several days a week, will be split evenly between Ha and his AZC group, and will mean millions of dollars. Until then, Ha is supported handsomely by fat merchandising contracts with such outfits as Fisher-Price and Hallmark. Muppet faces appear on coffee mugs, t-shirts, yo-yos, playing cards, pillowcases, and anything else that will take an imprint. Henson is good at big money deals, and smart enough to not boast about them. It's important to me that the audience doesn't think of us in terms of figures, he says. I don't want people looking at the Muppets and thinking, how much are they worth? Henson has a little time for brooding, even about money. After a few days of business talks in New York, he packed his winter clothes and flew to London, where, according to his contract with Grade, the TV series must be taped. Within hours of his arrival, shooting had begun. Several of the big Muppets had started an off-camera fight, but that had been quelled. Guest star Harry Belafonte had sung the Banana Boat song with spirit, even though Captain Link Hogthrob baked one of the bananas. In New York, costumer Calista Hendrickson worked on the purple chiffon dress for Miss Piggy to wear on one of the fall shows, which she dances cheek to cheek with Danny Kaye. Hendrickson began to talk about what the Muppets mean to people, and that reminded her of the first time the crew met ventriloquist Edgar Bergen, a guest star on one of the early shows. When he walked into our studio in London, they all gathered around him like children. Then the box was brought in, Charlie's box. They all sank on the floor and sat in a circle around it. Then Bergen opened the box, and Charlie came out and said hello and introduced himself around. He met Fozzie, and the two of them went on and on, all ad-libbed. No one moved an inch. Bergen did a cameo in the Muppet movie, and a few weeks later, he died. One of the stagehands on the movie couldn't understand why everyone was so affected by Bergen's death. He'd think Charlie McCarthy had died, he said. One of the puppeteers whirled around and said, "But he did, don't you see?" And so did Mortimer Snerd. And if Henson goes, Kermit goes. Kermit is alive and well, and Charlie and Mortimer were, after all, only puppets. If the world were a wholly rational place, their claims on it would be small. But if they do make claims, and strong ones, Kermit, rueful and dithered, for he is a part of our own nature so absurd and defenseless that we would never let a human actor hold it in his hands. What these puppets mean to millions of people who have watched them is almost embarrassing to express, because the feeling they evoke is nothing less than love. Here it says, Kermit opened the Muppet movie, crooning the Rainbow Connection. Miss Piggy serenaded her beloved with Never Before, Never Again. A creative visionary. While making the documentary Jim Henson Idea Man, director Ron was kind of an easy answer. He tells Entertainment Weekly, Jim related to Kermit for a set of reasons that makes me relate to Kermit. He's a pretty regular guy, just trying to get along, and yet he's surrounded by a bunch of high-octane, eccentric folks. He's trying to be the reasonable one in a world that could sometimes seem kind of mad. Jim got that, and I do too. The most interesting thing is that Jim, an introvert, but he became an extrovert when he had a puppet to work through. Howard continues. He became playful and more buoyant. He could say more outrageous things. For me, being on the set and directing is when I become an extrovert. It's when I open up and feel freer to express myself. This is the origin of the story of all these characters, Howard says. Of Idea Man, Kermit starred as his mother's coat and the fabric from some old coat she was throwing away. They didn't even know he was a frog for a long time. They didn't know what he was. He just fits Jim's hand, and Jim could create funny reactions, and the characters could be an alter ego for Jim. And then slowly but surely, he decided that he was Kermit the Frog. Howard came to know Jim Henson and his story intimately while putting together Idea Man, which chronicles Henson's life from his upbringing to the creation of the Muppets through his death at 53. Ahead of the film's May 31st debut on Disney+, we spoke to Howard to get the details on why he chose Henson as his latest documentary subject, what surprised him the most about the creator of the Muppets, and whether he would ever want to direct a Muppet movie himself. You've made docs about the Beatles, Pavarotti, and Jose Andre. What led to Jim Henson being your next subject? Ron Howard. The family was weighing whether or not they wanted to make archives available and sanction a documentary. Even though they're filmmakers and TV producers themselves, they didn't want to do it, and they were looking for a filmmaker. I went into it with a lot of respect for Jim Henson and the projects that I knew the best, and I didn't know much more. I had no idea about the dimension of his journey and his wife Jane's creative path, and how his early experimental work so anticipated these iconic characters and shows. There's a great creative origin that I didn't know would be so entertaining, fascinating, and ultimately inspiring, because they lived their lives totally around this quest for creative fulfillment, and we're beneficiaries of that. Here it says, Henson won 3 Emmy Awards for his involvement in The Muppet Show 1978, The Storyteller 1987 to 1988, and The Jim Henson Hour 1989. So I thought, well, this is an interesting celebrity profile to think about. Instead, it was this journey that I could relate to. It's different than mine in many ways, but it so recognized this excitement for creativity and desire to be as productive as you could be, and loving to collaborate with people. You were on Sesame Street back in the 1970s. When you were on Happy Days, did you get to meet Jim at that time? Not at that time. We didn't get to interact with any of the Sesame Street characters. We were Henley Winkler and I in character, and we did a quick learning piece. It was filmed on the set on the Paramount lot. I remember both of us being a little disappointed that we didn't get to hang out with the Muppets. What was your relationship with Jim Henson and the Muppets throughout your life? Did you get to meet him at some point? I met him very, very briefly in a really chaotic moment when we were both involved in this live primetime variety show ABC was undertaking. We were both going to be guests together, but we crossed paths. First, I thought there was a band wheeling a lot of gear. They had long hair and stuff, and I realized, no, it was Jim Henson. We briefly met, and that was it. Mostly, my relationship to him was just a fan. I appreciated the risks he was taking, the creative experiments that he was undertaking on a high-profile level, creating things like The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. When I got started working on the film, though, I realized that I didn't know that so many of those fantastic short films on Sesame Street, those little learning films about counting and letters and so forth, that Jim directed all of those, and he created all of that. He didn't just contribute the Muppets to Sesame Street, it was in his entire aesthetic and approach to learning fun. That meant a lot to me as a father, sharing this with my 4 kids as they grew admiration for Jim kept deepening. George Lucas, whom I have known well over the years, always characterized Jim as a bona fide creative genius. And I second that, having worked on the film and learned what I learned. But I also want to add that Jane Henson, his wife, was also extremely talented, very creative, and had a great eye for talent, including Jim, whom she recognized as somebody who had a lot to offer. None of this would have happened without her. In terms of Jane Henson, you really do foreground her. In Idea Man, when I spoke to you about The Boys, you and your brother talked about how you were always with your dad on set, but you didn't really appreciate how crucial your mother was in holding everything together until you were older. Was that something you saw paralleled? And part of why you wanted to make Jane so central to the storytelling? You're right about the discovery I made as a son, but this is quite different, because it was interesting that she had been so central in the development of the Muppets, the Muppet characters, and the Muppets as a business. I didn't know any of that about her. I felt it was important. It was interesting to hear her children talk about her and their dad with real affection and love and appreciation, but also to clarity as to the quirkiness, their foibles, and particular qualities that made their marriage work, and ultimately led to it dissolving. But what was left was this great family and entirely remarkable creative legacy. Here it says, Henson and Oz above had collaborated together since the early 1960s. Then opposite here it says a design sketch for the Muppet movie. Your company, Imagine, has worked with Frank Oz before. Was their relationship crucial to all this coming together? No, we would have done a film, even if Frank didn't want to be in an interview. But I was so thrilled when he did. It was our first major interview, and he offered so much insight and perspective that it really helped us begin to shape the story. Stylistically, on that first day interviewing Frank, I had the idea of trying to make his entrance in stop motion, which is one of the Jim Henson aesthetic styles that he used so much in those short films. In his experimental films, Frank knew exactly what I was talking about. In one take, he did this kooky entrance where he pops around and the chair spins around, and he sits down. It established for all of us on the creative team that Jim's sensibility was going to be a lot of fun to work with, and we wanted to be part of the fabric of the film. How did that shape the design of the space which you conducted those interviews, and the way you shot them? Jim was so experimental, and that's the stuff that we don't really know about. He had this TV show that they allowed him to make very inexpensively in the mid-60s called The Cube. It was a little humorous Twilight Zone-ish about a guy who was stuck in a room, and they didn't really know why he was there. And it was this great little set, and one of our producers said, hey, maybe that should be our interview space. Our cinematographer jumped on that idea. On a practical level, it meant we could take that to set any of our interview subjects, and it would make them feel like they were sharing Jim's space, and it was his world when you entered the cube, but it was also a great opportunity to use each of those cubes like they were a TV screen, and keep flooding our screen with images of all those characters, Jim's life, Jane's life, and the kids. It really energized everything, and we kept going deeper and deeper into the aesthetic of Jim's experimental films. It's about his creative life and his family and the legacy of his children. Do you think that there's something unique to the Hollywood families having come from one yourself? Look, it's a small business. There aren't that many people who are engaged in it. And for the percentage of those people, it's very high profile. Their family experienced that. It's unusual to have two parents who are so creatively engaged. That's something unique and bohemian about that. And yet the practical matters of life still factor in. The vestiges of traditional thinking could come in and have an impact on the family. All of this is interesting in terms of making this not only a celebration of his work or his creative journey, but a character study of the iconic individual. Was there anything Jim Henson's kids said that really surprised you? I would say the fact that he was a paradox and he wanted to be a traditional parent. He wanted a traditional marriage even though without drugs and the psychedelic side of the rebellion of the 60s. He was part of the counterculture. He was about the freedom of expression and experimentation and all of that. But when he came to his family, he was traditional. The paradox did surprise me. The film definitely shows his creative genius. But if you had to pick one thing as sort of his greatest gift, what would you say it was? his ability to be satirical but not cynical. He was able to, with great affection, say, "Look how silly we can all be, look how crazy this world can be," and yet not turn that into something bleak, but to recognize the joy amid the chaos. Was there one clip in the archival footage or story about Jim that really unlocked who he was for you? His experimental film, Timepiece. His kid said, "If you really want to know our dad, look at Timepiece. It doesn't have a puppet in it, but it does have this sense of kinetic energy, creativity, wit, and irony. It's funny, but it's also desperate, and the clock is a central character. You realize that somehow he was running against time, always. For whatever reason, he was in a race. Did he know that he was only going to live for 53 years? Of course not. But did he know that time was precious and life was fragile? Yeah, he did. He lived that way, but it was also the paradox of all his curiosity, his appetite for life, the whimsy about the way he expressed himself, and then these moments of desperation. You realize that this was a complicated guy on a very interesting journey. You told Jim's story, but would you have interest in directing a Muppet project, be it with Disney or the Jim Henson Company? I probably wouldn't, because I think that's already been so much great work done that I don't know that I could really add anything fresh or exciting to it. But I know they'll keep working with the Muppet characters because they're iconic, and through them they can say a lot about the world and the way that they can be very entertaining but carry a message. Here it says, from left, Jim Henson on the sets of The Dark Crystal 1982 and Fraggle Rock 1983. Here we have a scene from the TV special The Muppets Celebrate Jim Henson, which aired on November 21st, 1990. It's not easy feeling blue. Henson's goodbye. A Life magazine reporter visited Muppets headquarters weeks after Henson's 1990 passing by Stephen Harrigan from Life, July 1990. As a celebrity, Jim Henson seemed vague and uncertain. He was just barely in sight, hovering on the fringes of public recognition. When he appeared as himself on television, he came across merely as nice, boring man. His voice was high and reedy, his manner intense, but somehow languid. All in all, he looked at first glance like the sort of aging hippie you might find manning a booth at a crafts fair, passively trying to influence you in his line of Hobbit candles or handcrafted kaleidoscopes. So when he died, the effect was odd. Like millions of others, I suppose, I received the news, at first with a mild puzzlement. Jim Henson, the Muppet guy. Then went back to my day, not anticipating the sense of loss that slowly began to overtake me as the thought sank in. It was not grief, just an unnerving pang. I kept remembering myself as an anxious new parent sitting there in the sleepy afternoon quiet, the weight of a child in my lap, watching the glum, quizzical faces of the Muppets on Sesame Street. I thought of Bert and Ernie, tucked into their monogrammed twin beds, Kermit the Frog sitting on a swamp log, moodily playing the banjo, my 2-year-old daughter running up into the garage, and in the park shouting, "Oscar, Oscar." The Muppets were Jim Henson's invention, and it was his spirit, as well as his hands and voice, that animated them, until he died unexpectedly at the age of 53 of toxic shock syndrome following a serious bacterial infection. No one had apparently given much thought to the idea that the Muppets might, in any sense, be mortal. Henson's death made this curious notion unavoidable. After all, he did not just perform Kermit. He was Kermit. He was Ernie as well. He was Rolf the dog. He was the Swedish chef, the jolly curmudgeon known as Waldorf, the porcine space commander Link Hawkthrob. 2 weeks after his death, in the headquarters of the Jim Henson Productions in Manhattan, there was an air of exponential loss. Henson was dead, and his many characters were held in some kind of eerie suspension. No one was certain if they could ever truly spring to life again. I saw Kermit the Frog in the Muppet Steak Manhattan the other day. Michael Frith, the company's executive vice president, says, and he shone as a true movie star. Kermit was becoming richer and richer as the years wore on. More layered, more multi-dimensional. When you try to figure out where this deep welling sadness comes from, it's from the loss of Jim's talent. The seat of the Henson Entertainment Empire is an elegant brownstone in New York City that was built in 1928 as the home of the banking tycoon. It has since become, as one staffer said, been central staircase curves around a mobile that features a miniature Muppets cavorting up and down a series of hot air balloons, and the building is crowned by a stained glass skylight representing a swamp scene as it would be perceived by a low-lying frog. The day I was there, not yet 2 weeks after Henson's death on May 16th, a display cabinet in the entrance hall contained an empty director's chair, a photograph of Jim Henson, and framed letters of sympathy from Ronald Reagan and President Bush. The Walt Disney Company, which had recently structured a deal to acquire Henson's company, his creative services, and the rights to his non-Sesame Street characters, had sent over an outsized condolence card. On its cover, Mickey Mouse sat with his arm around the spindly shoulders of the bereaved Kermit. Upstairs, there was a growing pile of letters from children. One of them read, "God must have needed the Muppets in heaven." Stranded in the midst of all that playful decor, the Muppet wallpaper, the Kermit telephones, the plastic figures of Fozzie Bear, or Gonzo, or Big Bird, in clusters on the window ledges, and on the surfaces of every desk. Henson's colleagues were heartbroken, disoriented, still speaking of him half the time in present tense, still waiting to be convinced he was really dead. With striking consistency, they remembered him as a father figure, and it seemed almost a spirit guide, a quiet, authoritative, beloved man without a trace of aggression. It's easy to eulogize somebody, says Frank Oz. It would have been Bert to Henson's Ernie, Miss Piggy to his Kermit. Jim was not perfect, but I'll tell you something, he was close to how you're supposed to behave toward other people as anyone I've ever known. The range of Henson's imperfections included a wandering eye for women and a cheerful lust for material objects. He was known for his Kermit Green Lotus, his many homes in New York, London, Greenwich, and Malibu, and his classical antiques, which he proudly displayed alongside leftover props from various Muppet movies. And his famous consideration and patience could sometimes prove to be annoying traits when it came time for an urgent executive decision. But otherwise, he was just as he appeared, and one would have hoped him to be. He was playful, benign, tirelessly inventive, and only rarely a bit snarky. To express anger, he might turn the pages of a magazine faster than usual. His favorite expression was He encouraged silliness and chaos. Like Kermit, the undaunted host of the Muppet Show, he needed a storm to be the calm at the center of. Without Jim, Oz says, I'm a pretty serious person at times. He was the leader, always, but he allowed us to play. We had so much fun, I can't begin to tell you the fun. Oz had worked with Henson for 26 years, since he was 19. And there are people willing to argue that the two of them developed the comedy team as enduring as Laurel and Hardy or Burns and Allen. What Jim saw, Jane Henson said, is that the puppet is as powerful as a human being, and in fact more powerful, less concerned about what it looks like, more direct, more able to go into the heart of things. Jim Henson changed puppets forever, changed them into Muppets. One look at Henson's creations, and few people ever wanted to see a stiff, dangling marionette again. His puppets were designed for the close scrutiny of the television camera. Their eyes were uncannily expressive, and their wide mouths moved in perfect sync with their words. They did not seem to just represent living beings. They were alive themselves. Words we can't help but believing. But there is something about putting life in the inanimate doll, Jane Henson said. There is a bit of divinity in it that all puppeteers understand. That was the thought that kept coming back to me as later that day I went on tour in the workshop where the Muppets are made, and made all those half-assembled creatures of flocked and foam and slush latex. A puppet maker named Ed Christie showed me a file cabinet where the characters from Sesame Street, the actual working Cookie Monsters, and Oscar the Grovers were, and kept when not in use. Here's the real Bert, he said, and down here is the real Ernie. He took them out of the drawers and held them up. Bert with his familiar scowling face and ballistic-shaped head, Ernie with his idiot grin in repose. Their mouths open, their arms hanging idly at their sides. They were creepy, but they seemed not only inert, but bewitched, frozen under some dark spell, and it seemed at that moment that only Jim Henson, whose great genius had created them, and who was now gone, could ever release them. That's all they are, Christie said, just lumps of fabric. I watched as he put Ernie back Miss Piggy at the VIP screening of The Muppets Most Wanted on March 24th, 2014 in London. Chapter 2. Their Wide World. Across the globe, in stories and mysteries and tales festooned with holiday cheer, the Muppets, it sometimes seems, are everywhere. The Muppets and the movies. Though they get their start on television, the Muppets have graced the big screen 8 times, bringing laughs, heart, and joy to the box office by Courtney Mifsud and Triglia. The Muppet Movie, 1979. This movie within a movie begins with Kermit relaxing in a swamp, strumming his banjo when he's approached by a Hollywood agent. The film highlights Kermit's journey to become a showbiz sensation. Along the way, he makes some quirky new friends, including the feisty Miss Piggy and mirthful Fozzie Bear. As the group treks across America, they need to be on the lookout because his sinister frog legs merchant is after Kermit. The Great Muppet Caper, 1981. When jewel thieves steal a priceless diamond necklace from esteemed Lady Holiday, played by Dame Diana Rigg, two intrepid Daily Chronicle reporters, a pair of twin brothers, travel to London to investigate the theft. These twins are none other than the petite green Kermit and the tawny, fluffy Fozzie Bear. When Miss Piggy is framed for the theft, Kermit and his team set off to track down and catch the real criminals themselves. The Muppets Take Manhattan, 1984. The franchise's third feature film was first solely directed by Frank Oz. Fresh college graduates, Kermit and his friends set off to New York City to bring their musical act to Broadway. After months pass and their wallets empty, the group splits up to focus on their own endeavors. This movie includes the toddler-centric dream sequence that was used as the basis for the Saturday morning cartoon Muppet Babies, which ran from 1984 to 1991. The Muppet Christmas Carol, 1992. Our favorite belted friends honored the spirit of Christmas past, present, and future in this light-hearted adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Gonzo, as Charles Dickens, narrates the tale, with Michael Caine playing Ebenezer Scrooge. The rest of the Muppets ensemble weave in and out of the story as the grumpy Scrooge communes with the famous Christmas spirits. Muppet Treasure Island, 1996. The Muppets take to the high seas in a thrilling adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. Kevin Bishop stars as the protagonist Jim Hawkins, with Tim Curry as Long John Silver. When a former pirate hands Hawkins and his best buds, Gonzo and Rizzo, a treasure map, he leaves them with a warning: beware the one-legged man. The ensuing adventure includes a motley crew, several sea shanties, and tribal wild boars. Muppets from Space, 1999. Gonzo and his pals embark on a cosmic adventure in this zany science fiction comedy. After a pair of cosmic fish reveal that Gonzo isn't from Earth, but instead an alien from outer space, Gonzo attempts to convince the world that aliens exist. He and Rizzo the Rat are captured by menacing government agent K. Edgar Singer, played by Jeffrey Tambor, and the gang sets out to rescue them. Shelley Snipes, anchor for UFO Mania, played by Andy McDowell, grapples with Miss Piggy throughout the film. Sorry if you can hear the birds outside. The Muppets, 2011. The 7th feature film introduces Walter, a new Muppet who happens to be the world's biggest Muppets fan. His friends, Gary and Mary, portrayed by Jason Segel and Amy Adams, team up with Walter to save the vaudeville-era Muppet Theater from oilman Tex Richmond's clutches. To raise enough money, the trio unites the Muppet ensemble to put on the greatest Muppet telethon ever. Muppets Most Wanted, 2014. In the most recent feature film, finds the Muppets embarking on a world tour. Little do they know that Constantine, the globe's most infamous criminal, is a Kermit lookalike. In Berlin, the villain switches places with Kermit, landing the fan favorite in prison while Constantine continues the tour. Now we have a musical legacy. Since their earliest iterations, the Muppets have always had a penchant for tunes by Jed Gottlieb. It's time to play the music. Sing a mouse in a prairie bonnet and a pig with flaming orange hair and a pair of his first show, Sam and Friends, which ran from 1955 to 1961 on Washington, D.C.'s NBC affiliate, his madcap Muppets did standards from old black magic to the Yellow Rose of Texas. He was generally not singing, he was lip-syncing to records, says David Coles, who has performed Gonzo and other Muppets for 50 years. But I guess he just abandoned what music could do for entertainment, for comedy. Here it says, the Electric Mayhem Band in 2023, Disney series The Muppet Mayhem. Henson's emerging understanding of how music can fuel humor, heart, and hijinks spilled over into Sesame Street, but now, thanks to PBS funding, Henson's team had the budget and talent to create striking original songs. Sesame Street's musical director, Joe Raposo, was a classically trained musician and Harvard graduate who wrote for Frank Sinatra and arranged for Fred Astaire. Raposo elevated children's music by making simple songs carry deep emotions and clever whimsy, and he pumped out these songs at a furious pace. He would receive cans of film from the office, watch them overnight, and score them. Son Nick Raposo said of the more than 3,000 pieces his father said composed for the show. He was in the studio or on set probably 18 hours a day. Raposo's crowning achievement was being green. In the span of 2 minutes, the ballad takes Kermit from down in the dumps to triumphantly accepting his uniqueness. Being green is paired a relatable message with a pretty little melody so effortlessly that it became part of the Great American Songbook, covered by a list of legends, including Frank Sinatra, Lena Horne, and Ray Charles. Like Raposo, Sesame Street songwriter Jeff Moss wrote for specific voices that still had universal appeal, and he could write for anyone. Moss penned Rubber Ducky for Ernie and Nasty Dan for Johnny Cash. Between them, Raposo and Ross piled up a stack of favorites. C is for Cookie, I Love Trash, an entire album of Sesame Disco songs. They also taught generations the power of song. Sesame Street is one of the earliest examples of a musical I experienced, Lin-Manuel Miranda told the New York Times. I learned from Sesame Street that music is not only incredibly fun, but also an extremely effective narrative and teaching tool. On top of that, their songs are the closest thing we have to a shared childhood songbook. The collection of icons worked with Sesame Street is truly unparalleled. Stevie Wonder taught Grover how to sing. Dizzy Gillespie jammed on the bebop to blown away 5-year-olds. R.E.M. gleefully turned shiny happy people into happy furry monsters. The unprecedented success of Sesame Street opened the door for the Muppets show as a riff on vaudeville variety show. Henson's new program depended even more on music. Debuting in 1976, the first season leaned on songs and stars from Broadway, but it became a runaway smash. More and bigger rock stars realized a call from Kermit was a rite of passage. I never had so much fun in my life as doing the Muppet Show. Shock rock pioneer Alice Cooper remembered his work on the 1978 Halloween special. I said, who's going to be on it? And they said Christopher Lee, Vincent Price. And I went, I'm in. I didn't even have to think about it. I went, I'm in. If those guys can do it, I am privileged to do it. Here it says, music is an essential part of everything we do, Jim Henson said of his Muppet productions. Opposite Henson with songwriters Peter Matz, Lev, and Paul Williams in 1979. Love Paul Williams. And it says, Cooper's fitting Halloween spot embodied how the show let guests be themselves while pushing them to take absurd artistic chances. Rocking Crocodile Rock in a swamp, Elton John out-Muppeted the Muppets in a costume of massive rainbow feathers that made him stand out beside Technicolor hippies and Electric Mayhem. Dressed in fringe, rhinestones, and a 10-gallon cowboy hat, Miss Piggy moseyed up to an enchanted Johnny Cash to sing June Carter's Cash's part in Jackson. One legendary bit had Rita Moreno singing Fever with a worked-up Animal at his drum kit behind her. Not surprisingly, Animal gets too worked up and Moreno needs to settle him down by crashing his head between two cymbals. You can see her barely holding in a laugh for half the sketch. I'm usually so critical, but when I watch myself, I just laugh at me. Moreno remembers. What I love about it is that my character's trying so hard to be sexy and sultry, and this horrible creature in the back of me is acting up. See, she laughs. I can't stop laughing. It tickles me to death. Even Prince, who had the reputation of being notoriously difficult to work with, was clearly charmed by the experience of being on the 90s Muppets show Muppets Tonight. Prince's handlers had instructed the cast and crew not to talk to the icon or look him in the eye. I thought that was silly, Bill Barretta says. Barretta, who originated a dozen Muppet characters and inherited the roles of Rolf the Dog, Dr. Teeth, and others after Henson's death, went right over to Prince and asked if he wanted to see the characters. And of course Prince wanted to meet Kermit, Miss Piggy, and the rest. He was such a sweet guy, Barretta says, even after a wonderful gig where Barretta, as Bobo the bear, asked Prince about changing his name to an unpronounceable symbol. Right away we just beat him over the head with this simple name. But he had such a good sense of humor, he got the joke. The Muppets could come up with memorable music moments without guests. See Gonzo telling the audience, "Tonight I will eat this rubber tire," to the music of Flight of the Bumblebee. Spoiler, despite his grand ambitions to set on an operatic orchestral interlude, Gonzo was booed off stage. However, guest stars certainly helped. At the time of 1979's The Muppet Movie, Gonzo, Kermit, and the crew were the stars. They only needed songwriters who understood them. Songwriters Paul Williams and Kenneth Asher penned the Muppet Movie's immortal anthems. By the late 70s, both had impressive careers. Williams wrote Three Dogs Night, an old-fashioned love song, a handful of Carpenter's hits, the lyrics to the Love Boat theme, and more. Asher had arranged for everyone from John Lennon to Barbra Streisand. Williams, who knew Henson from their collaboration in 1977's Muppet TV movie Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, told Henson he wouldn't keep him in the dark during the Muppet movie songwriting process. Williams knew how important his job was and wanted to make sure Henson heard the songs and had confidence in them as he and Asher were drafting them. He said, "Oh, Paul, you don't need to do that." Williams says Henson trusted his instincts on who he reached out to work with. "I saw it again and again with Muppet performers. There was a creativity that wasn't only allowed, but expected." Williams and Asher rewarded Henson's trust with lasting songs that could define characters, set moods, and induced belly laughs. The Misfits of the Electric Mayhem Jam to Can You Picture That? Something between a groovy Doobie Brothers track and the funk of New Orleans keyboard wizard Dr. John, the inspiration for Mayhem leader Dr. Teeth. Lounge pianist Rolf the Dog offers up lyrical wisdom. What could be better than a saucy Irish setter when a puppy love comes on strong? Or a collie that's classy, a laddie that needs a lassie, a lover, and wife that gives a new leaf on life. And I hope that something better comes along. Topping them all, the tenderness and longing of the Rainbow Connection came to represent Kermit's gentle soul and eternal optimism. The first thing we wrote was the Rainbow Connection. Talk about setting the bar for ourselves, William says. Reading the script, we see Kermit in the swamp. And what does he have in this swamp? He has water, he has light, he has refracted light, he has rainbows. Like so many others, Williams found the Muppets to be much more than stitching and stuffing. He recalls Henson's attempts to record Rainbow Connection without Kermit in his arms lacked a certain magic. He seemed to need to have Kermit with him to sing the song fully. I can close my eyes and see Jim Henson in the studio with Kermit. Williams says, there was something about Jim with Kermit when he did the vocal for Rainbow Connection that just went bang. That when character and song connect, everything clicks, even when, or maybe especially when, the Muppet performers sing with those unvarnished creaks and croaks in their throats. That's part of the secret sauce, Cole says. These are non-professional singers. They're not professional anythings. These characters, they're just a band of crazy people that Kermit picked up on his way across the country. And there's something so accessible about that. From Sam and Friends to the Muppets Mayhem, Disney Plus's deeply underrated 2023 series about the Muppet House Band's quest to make its debut album. The music from the Muppets has enchanted the world over and over again. The Rainbow Connection alone has been covered by Weezer, Willie Nelson, Barbra Streisand, and Gwen Stefani. Well, the music has enchanted most of the world, Mayhem bassist Floyd Pepper never could stand the Muppets show theme. One episode, the show opens with Floyd positively outraged at the thought of having to perform the theme every night ad nauseum. I just can't take it anymore, he tells Kermit. It's embarrassingly square, and I don't play square. Thankfully, Floyd decides not to quit the show, and thankfully nobody else agrees with his take on the tune. I definitely agree that the Muppets Mayhem is underrated. Definitely worth a watch. And here we have above Rita Moreno and Miss Piggy during the Muppets Go Hollywood Special 1979. And then we have The Muppet Show from Top, Elton John 1978. Julie Andrews performing The Lonely Goat Herd 1978. Johnny Cash with Miss Piggy 1981. And Debbie Harry 1981. Here we have Robin, Kermit's nephew, in the part of Tiny Tim, led the Cratchit family rending of Bless Us All, as Miss Piggy served roast goose. Making a holiday classic, the Muppets sat down for an interview to reminisce about the Muppets Christmas Carol on the film's 30th anniversary by Maureen Lee Linker from Entertainment Weekly, December 2nd, 2022. For many, favorite holiday tradition is sitting down to watch 1992's The Muppet Christmas Carol, an adaptation of Charles Dickens' classic story with Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge and the Muppets as the remaining cast of characters, including Gonzo as Dickens himself. The classic, which uses more of Dickens' original text than any other cinematic adaptation, turns 30 this holiday season, and in honor of 30 years of Kermit watching a shooting star, Miss Piggy taste testing that Christmas goose, and Gonzo and Rizzo slamming into the side of a chapel, we got the gang to get back together to reminisce about their memories of making the film. To oversee the merriment, #1 Muppets fan Brett Goldstein, Ted Lasso's co-star and writer, and if you haven't watched this One Man in Muppet Christmas Carol, you really need to get to YouTube stat. Sat down with the cast. Let's honor Christmas in our hearts and try to keep it all year, as Kermit, Miss Piggy, Robin, and Gonzo take us and Goldstein through their Christmases past, present, and future. Brett Goldstein. What a joy to see all of you. You haven't aged a bit. Do you have a favorite memory or moment from that film? Should we start with you, Kermit? Kermit. For me, the best memory is being together. It was the first movie that we'd made in quite a few years, and it gave us the chance to play and have fun. It's the best part of everything we did, isn't that right, guys? Miss Piggy. For me, it was how Sir Michael Caine let me borrow his Oscar. Mikey, I promise I will give it back to you very soon. Maybe. Robin. My favorite part was when Tiny Tim did not die. Goldstein. Oh man, I think a lot of people really, really, really like that part. Kermit. Gonzo. Gonzo. My favorite part, being Charles Dickens, a great author whose last name rhymes with chickens. Let's face it, I was perfect for the part. Kermit. You sure were. Goldstein asks, was that how they sold you on it, Gonzo? They just said, do this, it rhymes with chickens, and you were like, I'm in. Gonzo. Yeah, plus, I got to go to London. What was that like? Oh, it's great. I've been there a lot before, but I love it. I got lots of friends there. I go out in the country and visit the farms. Piggy and I go visit farms together. Miss Piggy, what? Gonzo. I visit the chickens, she visits the pigs. Miss Piggy, that is not true. You're making things up. Kermit, maybe move on to the next question, Brett, before things get heated. Thank you, Kermit, for keeping things on track. Do you guys have a favorite moment in the film? Kermit, the skating on the ice. That was a lot of fun, especially for a frog. We haven't had ice in the swamp since the Precambrian era, so it was a real treat for me. You were a very good skater. And you were very old, too, Gonzo says. What? Well, you go back to the Precambrian era. No. I'm just saying that we have not had ice in the swamp since then. That's what I've been told. It's old frog lore. Don't you have any lore from were so many. I liked the whole movie. Actually, one of the most difficult parts for me was pretending that Uncle Kermit was my father. I kept calling him Uncle Kermit instead of Father Dad. That's okay, you did a great job. Spiggy says, I think my favorite moment was letting loose on old Scrooge and telling him what I thought of him. Everybody credits those 3 ghosts for changing his attitude, but I think it was Ma yelling at him that really made him change. Goldstein says that sounds about right. Gonzo, my favorite moment was flying across London with the ghost of Christmas past. You really haven't lived until you've hit a church steeple at 60 miles an hour. I don't know, I've never done that, and I still feel like I've lived. Which Muppet would you say is the biggest Scrooge? Well, Red, sometimes Statler and Waldorf will play Marley and Marley. They can be a lot like Scrooge, but the truth is, they're really good guys. Don't you guys think they are? Gonzo says, well, they must be. They come to every one of our performances. That's right. I always thought they were being punished for something. It says no. As for the spirit of Christmas, though, I would have to say that Kermit captures that. I really do. Yes, Kermit and I have our differences, but he's still the kindest, sweetest frog I know. It kind of feels like there's a but coming. Spuggy, why? Why but? No but. No but. You can stand to wear some clothes every now and then. I knew it was coming. There you go. One of the things I love about the film is that it's genuinely pretty scary. Were there any you held back on? Well, we were a little worried about the ghost of Christmas yet to come. It's a very frightening character. Fun fact here, and this is a scoop. Brad up. And I was actually up for that part. Goldstein, really? Yeah, but when Michael came, turned around and saw me, he couldn't stop giggling. So we changed it up a bit there. Yeah, you're not very intimidating. You're reassuring. I had to cover my eyes during the whole part. In fact, Mr. Brett, please let me know when you're done with this question. Okay, I will. I'm going to hide behind my cocoa. Well, I think the scariest part of making the movie was at the table read when Miss Piggy found out she wasn't playing the lead. Piggy says, oh yeah, I sure would have preferred being the lead actress, but I'm willing to settle for Best Supporting Actress award. Not that I got one. Gonzo, but in that moment, it was scary. She's not telling it quite right. This isn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. Goldstein, you can come up from behind the cup. What was your favorite song in the film? Do you have a favorite? Oh, I enjoy the overture by Mr. Paul Williams. It opens with a mournful clarinet, but also a thankful heart. Kermit says, yeah, they're all great, in my opinion. It all comes down to our good friend Paul Williams. It was the first time he'd worked with them since the Muppet movie. Paul, he's always been able to take a special feeling and turn it into beautiful music. If you ask me, Paul and composer Miles Goodman made every one of those songs a new classic. Oh, I agree with Kermit, but if I had to pick one song, then I'd choose It Feels Like Christmas. I've always believed every day should feel like Christmas. Joy, glad tidings, and especially, Kermit says, lots of presents. That's right, Kermit. How do you know? Well, I've known you a long time. There it says, above, at Foswig's Christmas party, Scrooge meets a young woman named Belle and falls in love. Opposite is Kermit and Robin as Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim. Goldstein, what about you, Gonzo? What's your favorite song? Well, I'm with Kermit. They're all great songs, but I'm a little bit disappointed, though, that my big solo number, I'm Charles Dickens and You're Not, got cut from the film. Do any of you know why this film is such an enduring classic? It's Piggy. Because I'm in it, no question. Kermit. There is that, Miss Piggy, but I think there's such a perfect story about redemption and being grateful for everything that life has given you. As Charles Dickens, let me just say thank you for the compliment. This was the first film the Muppets had made, but that was not an original story. What was it about A Christmas Carol that made you guys think this is a good fit for the Muppets? Kermit says, well, we'd always wanted to do a Christmas movie and a story. For a story, you can't do better than Dickens' A Christmas Carol, right? Redemption, gratitude, and you mix that with the Muppets and silliness, and you got yourself a good fit. Speaking, to be honest, I really wanted to do It's a Wonderful Moi, but there was a lot of pushback. I wasn't going to jump off a bridge or anything. Anyhow, so it's just as well. Gonzo, well, I think it's a good fit because of 2 words, public domain. As Charles Dickens, I know they didn't have to pay me a cent. So, Gonzo, playing Charles Dickens is not the normal part you are known for playing. What challenges did portraying that hold? son, Tiny Tim. It's a heartbreaking performance. I can't hear the sound of coughing without crying. I wondered how difficult it was to achieve that performance, whether there were versions you tried in rehearsal that you didn't use. Robin says, well, I tried one interpretation of Tiny Tim where we was a WWE wrestler and wrestled Mr. Scrooge. That got pretty quickly rejected. But as for the cough, well, growing up in a swamp, coughing is easy, especially when a horsefly goes down the wrong pipe. Excuse me. No, Robin, please don't cough. I'm sorry, Mr. Brett. Let's talk about Michael Caine, one of the great performances of all time. He should have won an Oscar for that. What was it like working with him? Did you learn anything from him? Did he learn anything from you guys? Hansa says, well, I remember working with Michael when Michael was having a sore neck. He was very tall, and I always had to look up to him. Michael was fantastic. He took the role very seriously, which is hard to do when you're surrounded by singing bears, pigs, and whatevers. He seems to enjoy working with us from the very first day. He even came back the second day. That's right. That's how you know he's a good actor. Great actor, says Miss Piggy. So, tell me how the music came about. Was Paul Williams left to his own devices, or did any of you help? Says, well, yeah, Paul. He read the original story in the script. In fact, he may be the only one who ever did read the script. There was a script. Anyway, like I said, Paul has got an incredibly amazing ability to take feelings and take the moment emotional and turn it into the first perfect song. And all we had to do was sing, right? And try to stay on tune. Kermit, do you still count the number of sleeps until Christmas? Oh, of course I do. Doesn't everybody? Boy, I sure do. For moi, every day is Christmas. Yeah, she's very big on getting presents. Brett, I hope that you brought some. Oh, did you bring me a present? Say it's in the car. Kermit whispers. I did, and it's in the car, and when I leave, I'll get it. Oh, good. I can't wait. Goldstein says, Robin and Kermit, the Christmas scat that you do. I listened to an entire album of that. How do you feel about it? Robin says, it was great fun. Did you know the whole thing was improvised, but it was based on a part of that old amphibian holiday song, Froggy went to scat singing? Kermit, yeah. We all learned it as tadpoles, and I'm pretty sure that's available on Splashify. Goldstein, can we get a snick of it? 3, 2, 1. Kermit, Robin. Froggy went to scat, and he did ride rabbit. Do you want us to keep singing? It's the same words over and over. I don't want you to ever stop. It's very repetitive. It's a folk song. Goldstein says, Robin, bless us all, is such an emotional song. I can't hear it without crying. How do you get through it? Well, gee, I was so nervous. I just wanted to get it right. But gee whiz, if you ever need to have a good cry, you can borrow my hanky. Goldstein, thank you very much. Robin, okay, here we go. Begins to sing, bless us all. Kermit, no, we don't want Brett to cry. Oh, gee, I'm sorry, Mr. Brett. It's all right. You have a real power. It does feel good, though, doesn't it? Goldstein says, yeah, Gonzo, you're famously a stunt artist. You put your body through a lot during this film. Falling out of windows, smashing into churches, all sorts of things. But actually, Rizzo was put through a lot worse. What was the most serious injury you sustained on set? And what was the hardest stunt to film? Gonzo says, as an actor, I used the Stanislavski method. He always told us, if it doesn't hurt, it's not acting. If it does hurt, you don't have to act. Wait a second, Gonzo. You're saying that you learned that from Stanislavski? Gonzo, yep. Good old Crash Stanislavski. Different Stanislavski. Got it. I'm sorry, Brett. Next question. Okay, can we talk about the song When Love Is Gone? There were some times when it was cut, sometimes when it's back in. What do you guys think? Is that song canon? Gonzo says, well, if I had any idea it was canon, I would have made them keep it in the movie. Miss Piggy, I still say it would have been better if I sang it. You say that about every song. In Gonzo, it's a different kind of canon. Oh, not the boom boom. No, not the boom boom. I hope that you don't think it is weird, but this film is my Christmas tradition. I watch it every Christmas Eve. Do you have a favorite holiday tradition? Kermit says, getting together with friends. Falling down the chimney. Piggy and Robin opening my presents. Oh, I guess we do have the same tradition. Goldstein says, the message of the story is to keep generous spirit of Christmas in your heart all year round. What are the ways you try to do that, or would encourage others to do? Kermit says, well, I would encourage people to spread the spirit of gratitude. Be thankful every day for your family and friends, whether they are frogs or pigs or bears or humans. And if we appreciate all of that, everything we got, it will be a much happier world. Robin, you took my answer, Uncle Kermit. Well, I think it's kind of a universal answer. It's a good one. I think you can keep Christmas in your heart all year round, and it's easy, especially if you never take down your decorations. Well, that is true. All I would say, love yourself and appreciate the weirdness in others. Goldstein says, one last quick question. What is the best line in cinema history? And is it no Jesus for us Mises? Robin says, no. It's every time a bell rings an angel gets its wings. Kermit says, that's pretty good there. I've got, here's looking at you, kid. That's pretty good, right? That's my Bogart. Robin, what is that? That's Humphrey Bogart. Those are great. My favorite is, you're gonna need a bigger boat. Or how about, alright, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. Muppet Sunset Boulevard. Ooh, I like it. I'll pitch that one at the same time we pitch Pride and Prejudice. What a double bill. Good luck to you. Thank you. You're going to produce. Oh, sure, if you'll have me. 100%. Alright, let's do it. I think the package is getting better and better. It really is. That is all we have time for today. I want to thank the Muppets for making my dream to come true. Have a wonderful holiday. And lastly, Robin, God bless us, everyone. Here above we have Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge. Opposite is Gonzo as Charles Dickens, and his friend Rizzo the Rat narrate the movie. Here is Kermit and Miss Piggy dressed up as each other in Muppets Haunted Mansion 2021. The Muppets Forever. Chapter 3. After a star-studded creative reboot and new corporate ownership, the Muppets entered their second, even more lucrative act. New set, new magic. In 2011, Time visited the 8th set of the 8th Muppet Features film, Disney's creative reboot of the franchise by Joel Steen, from Time November 23rd, 2011. Here it says, in the Muppets, left to right, Floyd Pepper, Fozzie Bear, Lou Zealand, Janice, the Swedish Chef, Camilla the Chicken, Dr. Bunsen, Honeydew, Gonzo, Scooter, Beaker, and Dr. Teeth. I'm not sure whether the vibe is coming from the Muppets or from Jason Segel, but everyone is really happy on this set. I'm not sure if there's much of a difference between Muppets and Segel, the star and co-writer of the new Muppets movie, but it takes Segel out. Between takes Segel out Muppets, the actual Muppets. His grin is still Kermit-wide, long after the real Kermit the Frog closes his mouth and collapses around puppeteer Steve Whitmire's hand. In the right opera balcony above the stage, it looks a lot like the original Muppet Show set. Crusty Muppet critics Statler and Waldorf shake their heads disapprovingly at Segel's enthusiasm. In the left opera balcony, the movie's producers shake their heads too. If you could peel away Jason's skin, says producers Todd Lieberman, there might be felt underneath. Segel took a lot of meetings with studios after the success of the Judd Apatow-produced comedy Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which Segel wrote and starred in. He played a frustrated puppet musical playwright who, in the movie's most famous scene, gets dumped by his girlfriend while he's full frontally naked. When Segel got to Disney, he pitched his idea for a movie with the Muppets, who had lost their way in the decades following the 1990 death at age 53 of Jim Henson, their creator and original voice of Kermit. They hadn't had a theatrical release since the less-than-blockbuster Muppets from Space in 1999. I'd come off all those R-rated Judd Apatow movies, says Segel, who also appeared in Apatow's Knocked Up. They kind of chuckled, and I think they thought I was kidding. But when Segel said he wanted to make a Muppet movie, he meant it. The script for the Muppets is sweet, old-fashioned, and smart, much like the beloved first three Muppet movies. Segel plays Gary, a super positive, super naive guy from the Pleasantville type of town who goes to Los Angeles with his girlfriend Amy Adams to meet the Muppets, only to find they have disbanded. Miss Piggy is embarrassed where she is the plus-size editor of French Vogue. Gonzo runs a plumbing company in upstate New York. Animals in rehab for anger management. Fozzie is in Las Vegas in a Muppets cover band called the Muppets. Christmassy they get back together to put on a show and save their old studio from Tex Richmond, Chris Cooper, an evil baron who wants the oil underneath it. On the set today, Cooper yells at Kermit with such ferocity and stomps so convincingly around the stage off camera that I think there's some mistakenly think he's spending the entire shoot in character as the villain. For the large group of comedians who grew up in the 1970s and 80s, Muppets were a gateway to drug to comedy. Stoller says, you'd try it and you'd want more of it. So you'd try Monty Python and Saturday Night Live, then you'd fall down the rabbit hole. They're so self-aware, and there are jokes flying everywhere. They're like The Simpsons without cynicism. It's been a while since there has been money resting on the Muppets. The past 20 years has been so kind to them. There were direct-to-DVD films, Miss Piggy did Pizza Hut commercials, Fell Together Dust. I'm probably a bigger fan of what I grew up watching than what I've been a part of, says Eric Jacobson, who has played Miss Piggy as well as Fozzie Bear, Animal, and Sam the Eagle since 2001. But a real-world need for the Muppets kept simmering. Even a snarky gossip monger like Perez Hilton, a recent visitor to the set, gets a little muppety around the Muppets. He was a really nice guy, says Walter, a boyish new Muppet, who in the movie is Gary's best friend from the small town, and likewise idolizes the Muppets. Perez asked me if I was involved in any scandals. I said, not any that I know of, but I'm sure you'll tell me if I have. Surprisingly, it's not that strange to interview a Muppet. Peter Linz, who plays Walter, doesn't feel weird talking to me with his hand in my face, so I don't either. The rule is you have to ask to interview the Muppet, and its handler at several times, even though I can totally see that Linz's hand is up there. Here it says, watching the Muppet Show, shaped what I find funny, said Muppets director James Bobbin, above with Siegel. Opposite from top, Siegel with Walter, a newly introduced Muppet, Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, and Kermit. It says, in fact, sometimes it's weirder looking right into Siegel's wide-open, happy eyes. Even with this Muppet love on set, Siegel's Muppetphilia seems a little intense. I have somebody watch outside my trailer because he's so into the Muppets and more, Miss Piggy says. I'm thinking of getting a restraining order. Amy Adams can sing every lyric of every song I can name from 1979's Muppet movie, and even she was freaked out. You kind of sign on to a man-child thing when you work with Jason. She says the only creepy idea is whoever marries him. Every time we have a new thing on set, he says, do we own that? Do I own that? Can I own that? I told him, you can't have the Muppet Show sign over your driveway. You'll never get married. At one of his first meetings at Disney, the executive brought up the Muppets, and Siegel immediately stopped paying attention, putting a Muppet on his hand and playing with it, until his dollar got to him to stop. Siegel says he has watched the Muppet movie more than 50 times, and that was before he even thought about pitching a new version. I relate to the Muppets on a very deep level, he says. They care about being nice to people. I don't really care about much besides being nice. For example, when a fan asked Siegel to officiate at his wedding, Siegel got a license online and performed the ceremony on The Tonight Show. He is thoughtful, cheery, and calm, and wants to make comedy that is much the same way, if that is possible. It hasn't been for a long time. There was Christopher Guest milking comedy wave. A Farrelly Brothers grows out comedy wave, a cringe factor wave, Siegel says. The Muppets stuck around by not being cynical. And now Disney is spending $50 million on a new movie with singing and puppets and old friends, saving the day by putting on a show. Either Siegel knows something about America that the rest of us don't, or he is about to go back to full frontal nudity. That's just such a weird article, but okay. Floyd Pepper, Dr. Teeth, Animal, Zoot, Lily Singh, Lips, Tosh Mowry, Janice in the Muppets Mayhem 2023. The Muppets in the Mouse House. The Disney Connection, How Kermit and Mickey Came Together Under the Same Roof, by Chris Nashawati. For the past 20 years, the Walt Disney Company has been on a spending spree unlike anything Hollywood has ever seen. In 2006, the studio made headlines by acquiring Pixar, the forward-looking digital animation startup that had single-handedly pushed the medium into the future with such hits as Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., and Finding Nemo. The price tag, somewhere in the neighborhood of $7.4 billion. Then in 2009, Disney checked off the next item on their wish list, purchasing Marvel Entertainment Incorporated and its stable of sequel-happy superheroes for $4 billion. Finally, in 2012, the company shocked Tinseltown one last time by gobbling up Lucasfilm Limited, George Lucas's money-minting production company and custodian of all things Star Wars and Indiana Jones, for $4.05 billion. In the dizzying aftermath of these three record-shattering, industry-disrupting deals, Disney's fabled backlot of Burbank was no longer just the happiest place on Earth. It was also the place with the biggest checkbook. Looking back on it now, however, there was another deal, a much more modest, but no less significant. Signed just prior to the frenzied M&A trifecta that would end up both announcing Disney's next-generation ambitions and symbolizing the dawn of its incipient second golden age. It was a deal that would have a seismic impact on the world of kids' television and movies, and involve some of the biggest personalities in pop culture, namely a haughty pig, a benevolent frog, and a menagerie of their closest felt-covered friends. In 2004, Disney would fork over millions to permanently move the Muppets into the Mouse House. In the moment, the pact certainly seemed like a win-win proposition. The Jim Henson Company, still reeling from the 1990 death of its 53-year-old founder and fearless leader, had found a loving home for its lovable Mary prankster children, said Jim Henson's daughter and co-chair and co-CEO of the Jim Henson Company, Lisa Henson, at the time. The deal we announced today is the realization of my father's dream, and ensures that the Muppet characters will live, flourish, and continue to delight audiences everywhere forever. As for Disney, it now had something else, a virtually bottomless well of kid-friendly IP to tap into and expand for generations to come. 2 decades later, it seems like a good time to check back in on this historic merger and see how it's played out and what it's produced. Just as Lisa Henson's and her famous father had wished, the Muppets did end up finding a welcoming new home in Burbank. At first, their new owners may not have quite known what to do with the new tenants, but after a slow start, Miss Piggy and Kermit, not to mention Fozzie and Animal and Beaker, haven't had much time to rest since Disney's unofficially rebooted the franchise with the star-studded 2011 big screen release, The Muppets, $165 million global box office. It has feverishly rolled out a 2014 theatrical sequel, Muppets Most Wanted, $80.3 million, and an entire library of new and classic Muppet movies and shows. All this while strategically extending the brand's furry footprint even further into their lucrative worlds of licensing and merchandising. Even a pair of cranks like Statler and Waldorf couldn't bellyache about that. Here it says, in the third episode of the 2015 series The Muppets, the friendship between Fozzie and Kermit takes center stage, opposite from top. Muppet Babies 2018 and Muppet Now 2020. Not surprisingly, the massive engine driving the latest round of Muppet Mania is the company's streaming platform Disney Plus. Launched in late 2019, Disney Plus is one of the major streaming platforms, the only major streaming platforms that has been able to compete with Netflix in the post-cable era. With more than 125 million in monthly subscribers compared to Netflix's 300 million. Disney Plus isn't just a musty mothball-scented repository where the studio can dump its fast hits and let them gather dust. It's a prolific generator of original content that also includes the fruits of the studio deals with Pixar, Soul, Turning Red, Marvel, WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Lucasfilm, The Mandalorian, Andor. As for the Muppets, Disney Plus has become the comprehensive one-stop shop for all things felt-related. In fact, the streaming platform currently has so many Muppet options on its menu, it would make the Swedish chef green with envy. In addition to serving up the franchise's reputation-making classics, including all 5 seasons of The Muppet Show, 1976 to 1981, pure catnip for nostalgic Gen Xers, there are also 6 pre-Disney Muppets movies, from 1979's franchise starter, The Muppet Movie, to 1999's intergalactic coda, Muppets from Space. Less familiar to older fans, however, is the buffet of more recent made-for-Disney Muppets originals, which have managed to make the brand as relevant today as it's ever been. The earliest signs of a Muppet resurgence came in 2009 with a viral music video that had the Rhapsody. It would go on to win 2 Webby Awards and rack up more than 185 million views on YouTube. The table was set for a renaissance. That renaissance would arrive in earnest with the 2011 franchise revitalizing big screen smash The Muppets, which starred Amy Adams and longtime Muppet fanatic Jason Segel. The movie wasn't just a welcome blast from the past for a generation that had grown up on all things Henson, including non-Muppet titles like Fraggle Rock, The Dark Crystal, and Labyrinth. It ended up successfully introducing a new character, Walter, and winning a Best Original Song Oscar for Man or Muppet at the 2012 Academy Awards. Critics and fans, both old and new, didn't just approve, they wanted more ASAP. In an effort to feed this insatiable new appetite, Disney would end up doubling down with the short-lived original series, The Muppets. Initially airing on the Disney-owned ABC on September 22, 2015, The Muppets is a mockumentary-style show offering a behind-the-scenes, or is it behind-the-scenes, look at the gang's off-screen lives. The show never quite caught on to its network slot, and it was cancelled after a single 16-episode season. Fortunately, The Muppets proved to have a long tail due to its second life on Disney+, where the show within a show, Up Late with Miss Piggy, finally answered the question, what would The Tonight Show look like if it was hosted by the biggest porcine diva on the planet? Make no mistake, The Muppets is a kids' show all the way. But there are more than enough fourth-wall breaking bits of meta-hilarity in the style of The Office and Modern Family to hold the parents' attention as well. The next trial balloon to get off the ground in the Disney era turned out to be the highly anticipated reboot of The Muppet Babies. The show's fondly remembered first iteration aired on Saturday mornings on CBS from 1984 until 1991. Over 8 seasons and 107 episodes, the animated show is targeting kids in the 2 to 5 year old age demo. Imagine Henson's beloved characters as toddlers, all growing up as play pals in the nursery. For the record, Little Fozzie is particularly adorable. This wasn't the first time fans got a peek at what Kermit might have looked like shortly after his tadpole stage. The idea was initially conceived for a dream sequence in 1984's The Muppets Take Manhattan. It's hard to say whether Muppet Babies ultimately went dark because of lackluster ratings, or because even Muppets must go through a better left unseen awkwardness of puberty. But either way, the show would continue to live on, only in pixie dust memories of its original pint-sized fanbase until 2018, when Disney gave the show another shot. Airing on the company's Disney Junior channel, Muppet Babies 2.0 lasted for 3 seasons, 71 episodes, before finally being a sunset in 2022. Ever since Disney's acquisition of the Muppets in 2004, the studio has wrestled with how to bring Henson's creature creations into the present. To fans, it often felt like Disney was too focused on its other, shiny new toys from Marvel's cinematic universe, and a certain galaxy far, far away, to have much bandwidth left to figure out what to do with the Muppets. But in the summer of 2020, the Mouse House would finally focus and create a Muppets Now, the studio's first Muppets original production for the Disney Plus. The unscripted and improvisational short-form series airdropped the Muppets into a variety of comic scenarios, including wacky cooking show segments with the Swedish chef, Pepe the King Bronze, quiz shows, and lifestyle tips from Miss Piggy. It lasted just 6 episodes before the plug was pulled. That said, Muppets Now is well worth checking out, especially if you are ever curious what Saturday Night Live would have looked like if Lorne Michaels' early experiments with the Muppets on his revolutionary 70s sketch show had clicked with audiences in the way that Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner, and John Belushi did. Rather than admit defeat and pull the plug on further original Muppets productions for Disney Plus, the studio went back to the drawing board and bankrolled a new made-for-streaming movie. The 2021 Halloween-themed Muppets Haunted Mansion featured a crazy quilt of flesh-and-blood celebrities, including Will Arnett, Daryl Crist, Tara J.P. Henson, and John Stamos. Released on the streamer on March 8th, 2021, Muppets Haunted Mansion is a spooky Scooby-Doo-esque comedy centered on Gonzo and Pepe as they attempt to spend a night in, you guessed ghost host. Of course, the rest of the gang drops by in various creepy crawly disguises to scare the wits out of the two scary cats. The 50-minute long special remains a frightfully delight and a staple of the scary season. Here it says, opposite Gonzo, Yvette, Nicole Brown, and Pepe King Braun in Muppets Haunted Dimension 2021 above, releasing an animal in the Muppets Mayhem 2023. It says, which brings us to the most recent Muppets streaming exclusive, 2023's Muppet Mayhem, which also happens to be the franchise's most inspired Disney Plus creation to date. The show is essentially a Muppet-centric riff on Behind the Music, the addictive VH1 Rise and Fall docuseries from the late 90s. The Muppets Mayhem chronicles the arc of the Wild and Woolly Henson House Band, Dr. Teeth, and the Electric Mayhem as they recorded their first album. Disney Plus initially dropped a bingeable 10-episode batch of the Clever Cheeky Show on May 10th, 2023. The Muppets Mayhem would receive 6 Children's and Family Emmy Awards and end up winning for Outstanding Children's or Family Viewing Series before the studio threw in the towel. Looking ahead, the path forward for the franchise seems brighter than ever, according to Lee Slaughter, Vice President of the Muppet Studio and Live Character Strategy for Walt Disney Imagineering. Fans today want the same thing from the Muppets that they've always wanted. I don't think it's any different, she says. They want some laughs and a little bit of joy. We're here to make the world a whole lot happier and a little weirder. To that end, fans may want to start booking their travel plans for next year because they're about to see a lot more of Kermit and company at Disney's cruise ships, theme parks, and live appearances from the characters on land and sea. But hands down, the biggest attraction will be the gang's first ever e-ticket amusement park ride. Slated to open at Walt Disney World in Orlando sometime in 2026, the Rock and Roller Coaster promises to be the ultimate Muppets experience. The paint on the ride isn't dry yet, so Slaughter is a bit guarded about getting into too many specifics, but she teases that it will include a pre-show area where you'll hear from the characters and a groovy in-ride soundtrack by, who else, Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. So now, if you'll excuse us, we have to wrap up this story and go online to buy our tickets. See you there. Yeah, I don't think you'll be seeing me there. It does sound like fun, but a bit of pricey fun. Taking the leap. In 2025, Kermit delivered the commencement speech at the University of Maryland. Here's a brief nugget of his wisdom. Leaping is kind of something we frogs know a thing or two about, and judging by the number of you who've leapt into McKeldin Fountain at 2 o'clock in the morning, so do you. You know, when I was just a little bit younger than all of you, I used to have fun in the swamp playing leapfrog. It was our favorite game, or kind of our only game, but we loved it, except for my cousin Albert. He never actually leapt. He just kind of stepped on your back and used your head like a lily pad. Sure, he got ahead, but it was only by stepping on you. We've been told that that's how you succeed, and some Jim Henson.